Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Keene School District's deliberative session for 2015. My name is Joseph Hoppick, and I'm the moderator for the meeting. To my right is John Wrigley and the clerk, Beth Zinn. The school board is before us here. We have administration officials right here. Before we get started, I'd like to run over a few rules of the meeting. This is a deliberative session, which means we're going to deliberate the articles that will appear on the warrant on March 13th when we go to vote on them. So amendments are permitted to the articles if you want to make them, and we'll vote on them at the time. Now, when we vote on these articles, or the amendments rather, we can vote on them by ballot measure if 5 people sign a petition or a request in writing requesting a ballot vote on the amendment. And everybody should have received a purple sheet with various ballots that are perforated. You tear them off when the time comes and use those. Now, I want to make a couple of remarks about these purple sheets. You see at the bottom of the first page, it begins with ballot question B, and then it goes up to C, D, E, F, G, H, and I. We're going to go up in that order. So you start with the bottom one first, and we'll go through with respect to each ballot vote. We'll go up the sheet, and then we'll use those. If you use the wrong ballot letter, we can't count it, because we don't know if you're stuffing the ballot, basically. So please be sure, and I'll remind you at the time that we vote, which ballot sheet you're going to use. Does everybody have one, first of all? Okay, good. So we'll move on from there. I do have already a request for a written ballot on any amendments to Article 1. So we'll be voting on that, any amendments to Article 1 by written ballot. And if anybody wants to present a request, they should bring it up here and give it to myself or Beth Zinn, the clerk, and we'll honor that request. Now, a couple of rules. We have microphones. I'm sorry, we have one over there by Fred Parcells, and I can't see where the other one was, but it used to be right here. Where? Okay, got it. Thank you. You'll be given a sheet you can ask Jean Harper or Fred Parcells for a sign-up sheet. Put your name and address on that sheet. Fred's walking over here. And we will bring them up here, and we'll try to keep them in order and call your name when it's time. And then you can speak, and if you want to speak again, fill out another sheet. I would ask everybody to be mindful of what other people have said and not be unnecessarily redundant about comments. If it's said once, it really doesn't need to be said again. So with that said, I would ask everybody to be respectful of others' opinions and just have our deliberation so we can vote in an orderly manner and move on from there. I have a couple of announcements. For those of you who will not be able to, may have trouble seeing the PowerPoint presentation during today's meeting, there is a hard copy handout that you can get from Caitlin. She's sitting right there to my right. And the other point I want to make is that the Keene School District has a website, and on the website there's various information on the budget, materials that you can click on and look at on your computer. There's banners for that on the website. So if you're having trouble following along with the written material provided today, you can always access the website. Okay, does anybody have any questions before we begin? One more thing I want to mention. I may be asked during the course of this meeting to make a ruling on a procedural matter. I don't follow Robert's rules because I don't know them, and I don't want to know them. My rule is fairness and equal opportunity for everyone to speak. So I'm going to be guided by that principle. And there are certain legal requirements we're bound by. That's why John Wrigley is here to my right. He's the lawyer for the school district. And I may consult with him on a point, but once I make a ruling, that's the rule. You can overrule me if you want to make a point of order and a motion to overrule the moderator. If you make that motion, it needs to be seconded, and a majority of you can overrule me. If there's no majority vote, then I'm not overruled. Is everybody clear about that procedure? Yes.
How do you know if you're going to speak or not before something's brought? You said get a piece of paper.
Yeah, Mr. Parcells or Ms. Harper can give you a piece of paper. Well, you look confused.
I may not want to speak until halfway through.
Well, then you'll fill it out then.
Oh.
And give it to the lady.
Okay.
You'll have plenty of time, I promise, to speak. We're not going anywhere, right? Okay. Now, with those remarks, seeing no other questions, I'll turn the meeting over to the chair of the board, Chris Coates.
Good morning. At this time, I'd like to have Thomas Zott, who is a Keene middle schooler, grade 6, come down and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand.
Start right off.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Thomas. And now I'd like to, I've heard these guys many times, and they're from the Keene a cappella choir. They're a group separate from them, but it's all young ladies from Keene High School. Their group is called Momentum. And if they could come over for a second and just introduce themselves, that would be great. And then they're going to be singing the national anthem. Good morning.
Hi, okay. I'm Isla Cordell. I'm the director. I'm Anna Briggs. I'm in it. I'm in it.
I'm Zosha Silverstein.
I'm Natalia Toomey.
I'm Riley Sullivan.
Right close to the mic and you guys can sing
Right
it.
close to the mic? Okay. We're just gonna have some space.
Please stand.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Well done.
Thank you. And if you really want to see all these ladies perform in May, correct me if I'm wrong, in May they have an incredible evening called Nostalgia Night, where they all do group acts and they singular, solo acts. It's just an incredible evening of music. So look for that in May. As my time as chair of the Keene Board of Education comes to a close, I'd like to take a moment to talk about some of the areas the Keene School District has been working diligently on in the past year. We've been working hard to improve the core foundation of all our schools, and I know that for the foreseeable future, we will continue to address those goals of our strategic plan. Those goals are to build a positive school culture for all students, ensure our curriculum and instructional practices are challenging and meaningful and inspiring for our students, gather and analyze data on our culture, curriculum, and instructional practices to ensure consistent growth and improvement in these areas. We understand that each school is at a different pace in this process. At the same time, we are working together as a district to help each school move forward and for them to find success and growth. Principals and teachers have come together to collaborate on levels that we have not seen in years. This commitment from the administrations, principals, and teachers to a common vision has galvanized a clear direction for all our staff that their community should be proud of. The Keene School District has been working to make sure we prepare for the new challenges of the Common Core standards. We have stayed clear of and not allowed ourselves to be slowed down by the politics of standardized testing and the development of the Common Core in our district. We have welcomed higher expectations and understand that there is a new normal in place, that being the smarter balanced testing that will be occurring this spring. As the Keene School District becomes more familiar with this tool, it is our expectation that the Keene School District will rise to meet this challenge and soon be seen as a leader in the state of New Hampshire. The Keene School District has developed a new teacher evaluation tool, which has principals and assistant principals observing in the classrooms more often than what past practices were. This is a cultural change in our district, and early findings have shown positive results because of the frequency of the administration being in the classroom, as this allows for more discussion and feedback. The increased visits by administration and their conversations about improving instruction has clearly helped our teachers and schools to better meet the needs of every student. This year, the Keene School District has focused on the development of the 2015-16 budget on what is called student-based budgeting. This focuses the level of funding on what each school receives based on their student enrollment in their building, as well as the demographics of each school. This budget is a true reflection of balancing of quality of education and at the same time minimizing the tax impact. The Keene School District continues to look at new ways to generate revenue to help offset the decreased enrollment and the decreased or underfunding from the state of New Hampshire. Last March, the board and the community approved the development of an endowment. I'm proud to say that the board of directors has been put in place and bylaws that allow the governance of the board have been adopted. As of October 2014, we have been designated as a 503c nonprofit status. The Keene Education Endowment is now reality, and it is our hope that early this fall we will be sending out our first fundraising letters to over tens of thousands of former Keene High graduates. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize Ann Zod, who spearheaded the development of the Keene Educational Endowment. Without her leadership and dedication, we may not be as far along as we are today. Over the past 3 years, we have worked hard to develop a partnership with the Monadnock Regional School District. Monadnock, like Keene, is seeing the same declining enrollment and less funding from the state of New Hampshire. Their struggles are the same as ours, that being how to ensure that every student who walks through our doors graduates and is ready to be participating and a valued member of their community. It is time for the two school districts to look at the obvious, as they did in the late 50s and early 60s when our schools were overflowing with students. The Monadnock School District and the Keene School District were born along with the two high schools. It's time for us to have that discussion again. It's time for us to become one. This conversation will not be easy, and there will be many obstacles that could derail this dialogue. It is my hope that the boards continue to have those collaborative sessions that have been occurring, and the partnership continues to grow. As this is my first session as chair of the Keene Board of Education, I want to thank the teachers, our district, and our teachers. I want to thank the teachers in our district for the magic they create and the dedication they have for every student in their classroom. I want to thank the administrators, SAU, and the principals for their vision and leadership in helping us to continue to move the Keene School District forward. I want to thank my colleagues, past and present, on the Keene Board of Education for your tireless and passionate advocacy that you have for public education. You are second to none. It has been an honor serving all of you. I leave you with a quote from Nelson Mandela: "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We will now turn to the 9 articles presented in the school warrant, and 4 articles in addition to the 9 were presented by petition from the public. We will take them in the order they will appear on the warrant. Article 1 reads, "Shall the district raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote at the first session for the purposes set forth therein, totaling $64,529,015. Should this article be defeated, the operating budget shall be $63,618,688, which is the same as last year with certain adjustments required by previous action of the district or by law. Or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, Roman 10 and 16 to take up the issue of the revised operating budget only." That is the substance of the article. Do I hear any discussion? Sir,
I think the number, Ted Parent, 242 Beaver Street. I think the numbers that you read is for the default budget were different from what's up on the board.
then I may be reading from an old sheet. Okay, 64, okay, thank you. 64,529,000, that's what I have, 15 as the operating budget.
It's the default budget that was different.
63,671,815. Okay, thank you. I stand corrected. Point of order noted. Any questions, comments, or anybody wish to speak on Article 1? Seeing none, we'll move on to Article 2. Shall the district approve the cost items included in the... I didn't see it. Okay. Carl, you're too close. Yeah, go ahead.
So before we get into the detail of Article 1, we want to take a step back and kind of build off what Chris was talking about. There's going to be a lot of numbers today and a lot of percentages, but I think we really need to keep in mind what this whole district is galvanized around. We're galvanized around building a positive school culture in each one of our schools, making sure our curriculum and instruction are meaningful, inspiring, and challenging for all of our kids, and then making sure that we're tracking data on this work to make sure we're getting better at what we do. That's the big work. It gets lost in all the numbers. It gets lost in $64 million, but that's what we've committed to do, and that's our focus. We're happy to go into any details around things like cultural RTI, developmental designs, responsive classroom, understanding by design, smarter balance, lots and lots of edu-speak in there, but we're happy to go into that detail when we need to. Go to the next slide. And I think the main thing to keep in mind is, before Carl kind of gives us the big picture of this budget, is there's three things that are happening in this budget besides that big push. This budget is about what we need. We definitely need more supplies for the Common Core state standards. When you look at the numbers, I think it's a pretty insignificant investment, but we definitely need that there. We definitely need to upgrade our infrastructure. Part of that's part of the elementary reconstruction, but there's other things we need to address as well. We also need technology upgrades. There is no doubt that we have a great new technology director, and he's doing fabulous work, but we have a lot of years where we did not have that, and we need to build that back up again. And we also need to continue on the path of the professional development. We have invested heavily in our staff in the last year and a half, and we need to continue to do that. And that's what's going to make all the points on the prior page happen. This budget is also about what we did not need. To go back to what Chris was saying, we had a lot of difficult conversations the last couple months. We had to actually really construct budgets around the number of kids we had in each building. That creates tough conversations, but we had them. We made some difficult choices, and they show up in this budget. So we need to keep that in mind as well. But also, the third major theme that this budget is about is our restructuring and renovation of the Keene elementary schools. We have a great 2-year plan in place. This is change, but it's stable change. And this budget makes sure that can happen, and I'll go into more details of that later. Now, Mr. Panza is going to go into the big picture of the budget.
Okay, the Article 1 was obviously just read to you by Mr. Hoppick. I just want to explain one thing with Article 1, and that is if this article is defeated, the operating budget will be $63,671,815, and that is better known as the default budget. And the default budget, very simply, is last year's fiscal year's budget plus all of the contractual obligations that we owe we can't control it. For example, bargaining agreements or insurance or what have you. We have no control over that, and that's added on to the last year's budget, and that's what's called the default budget. Basically, a very simple version of a definition of it. So we go on to next slide. I got to make sure I speak into this microphone. I got scolded a little while ago, so if you can't hear me, let me know. We have the 2014-15 operating budget here. That's last year's budget. And this year we're asking for $64,529,015. That's an increase of 1.1%, or $642,964. And that's a very reasonable increase. Next slide. Okay, here's a bar chart explaining, I'm going to take this off here, it's much easier. A bar chart explaining what our spending looks like. And this gives you a clearer picture. For example, here is the contractual salaries and benefits. That's an expense. These are technology upgrades. We need new iPads and wiring throughout the school. These are all major expenses, by the way. This is capital improvement, $167,000 and $167,700, and we also have common core supplies that's of $72,057. We also are involved with the Keene Elementary construction, which we're going to be pouring in $689,273. However, we're also saving on the plus side the exact same amount. So we're using that savings for the reconstruction of the elementary school. So you can see they're both exactly the same number. Other savings, we have out-of-district placement savings of $611,000. We have special warrant articles of $100,000, which happen to be the reserve fund for facilities. And we have debt service of $51,248. So these are all the major issues that we're dealing with in the expense side. Next slide. This is exactly the same as that bar chart. It just breaks it down in the text form. But what it shows is all of the major increases and all of the major decreases. Those major expenses come to $508,762. All the rest of them, which are not major, totals it actually totals $642,964. In other words, you're simply subtracting this from that, and that difference is the other minor expenses that are included. Okay, next slide. Okay, so in the revenue side, I have to mention something here. I have the unenviable task of explaining a very complicated budget to citizens who have not got involved with this thing, and so it's very difficult. And there may be a way of solving that problem, and I'll show you in a minute. The major revenue decreases and increases. Tuition, for example, we're expecting $158,671 extra. But we're losing here out on local revenue of $152,368. We're losing out in building aid of $138,687. We're losing out on the transfer to building fund, a capital reserve of $100,000, although there'll be a warrant article matching that. We're also losing out in an unreserved fund balance surplus of $372,142. So your net decrease on your revenue side is $594,992. Your percent decrease is minus 1.87%. If you remember, our increase in the expense side was 1.01%. That was an increase. Our decrease on the revenue side is minus 1.87%. Okay, next slide. This is very hard to read, and for those people, yes, I know. You have this chart in your handout, but I wanted to explain something, if you can see some of this. But basically, this is your revenue picture, and these are all the cost centers related to the budget. In other words, you have preschool, you have grounds and facilities, you have Cheshire Career Center, you have Willox School, you have all the cost centers are located on this section right in here. And in this section, you'll have the increases and decreases that are associated with each cost center. And then we have a grand total over here of 64 million odd, I can't read that, $64,529,015, I guess it is. And you see there's the 1.01%. You really have to really like numbers to understand this. And we have the revenue side. We didn't break down the revenue, but we have a district revenue source of $31,804 and $804,500. We have a grand total. Yeah, this is the revenue. This section right in here is what the taxes will be. In other words, we would have to make up the difference of that 1.1% increase in expenses, and we would have to make up the difference of that minus 1.87% in revenue. And that difference is 3.8%, or 3.8 something percent, or 86%. We have to make up that difference. And the way we make it up is through our property tax. And if you follow the follow the bouncing ball, you'll find out exactly what your taxes are. Now, I don't expect you to remember all this or even understand it, but I will say that it's in your handout. And this was obviously done on a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. So those people who like numbers and want to understand exactly what their taxes will be down here, you're going to ask the business office, Tim Rowe, to send you a copy of this version in Excel, and you can play with all the numbers you want. In other words, you can increase one cost center or decrease another cost center up here, and automatically down here you'll find out what your tax rate is. So for those of you, again, that like playing with numbers, we've given the citizens the opportunity to play their own games with the taxes. Okay, next slide. Okay, so basically, this is what we come up with. We have a revenue picture of, as I pointed out earlier, minus 1.87%. We have a expense increase of 1.01%, and the total comes to 3.86%. This is the amount that has to be raised by property taxes, 3.86%. Okay, next slide. Okay, these are the cost centers. I had mentioned on that large chart that Mr. Black will be explaining all of the decreases and increases related to the cost centers. So here you go, Dan. Just press that right there if you want to use that.
Thank you, Carl. So I have the pleasure of going over all the details of the different cost centers. I'll probably go at a fairly brisk pace, but there's plenty of time for questions at the end, so if you have them, just save them, and we're happy to go into them. So Jonathan Daniels is our first cost center. Obviously, there's a big decrease there. That's because the school is going from 12 total sections to 6. There'll be no kindergarten there next year, and this is all part of the restructuring plan, and there'll be 2 5th grades. So the lion's share of that reduction is 6 classrooms going away. We're also moving the LD Collaborative from Jonathan Daniels to Wheelock, so that's part of the reduction. But there's also an increase there because Jonathan Daniels is going to function as a full school, fully run school next year, and we need to make sure we're making the same investments for them that we're making all the elementary schools around our Common Core supplies. So total, they're down about $800,000 or 33% change. Then we go to Benjamin Franklin School. It's a pretty big increase because part of the restructuring plans, we have this first grade group that's a little bit larger. And just demographically, a lot of them live in the Franklin area. So we have to increase that by 1 total section. So there'll be this 3rd section that kind of continues through Franklin over the next 4 years. So we need an additional teacher there. We also had to increase a paraprofessional from full-time to part-time to better meet the needs of our special ed students. And there was 1 student who needed an LPN. So all those kind of drove some higher increases, but we are right-sizing the school to the kids who are there and making sure they have enough funds. We are also increasing the Common Core supplies for them with math, writing, and ELA programs, so there's an investment in there as well. And also, I think what's new is, there's a certain number of kids who've kind of fallen behind there. We've definitely had up and down leadership there over a couple of years. That's all changed with Eric Kress becoming our principal and stable there. And I think what he really wants to focus on, and there's a chunk of kids who are struggling that shouldn't struggle. So the teachers and him want to put in some extra time after school to make sure that they close that gap next year. So that represents about $265,000 or about a 9% increase of the Franklin budget, but it's what they need. Next slide. If we go to the Fuller School, Fuller is largely staying the same. There's not a lot of really significant changes. What you see in that $126,000 increase is, we had a new contract for the KEA, and there's teachers there, and they got increases in their salaries, and that drove most of the change. There's definitely a slight increase also in terms of supplies for math, writing, and ELA, but largely Fuller is not changing a lot as a part of restructuring next year, so basically just contractual increases at Fuller. Next slide. We go to Simons, similar theme. There's not a lot of major changes at Simons. It's largely that $135,000 increase is largely contractual changes. Again, there's a contract and teachers got raises and that got captured in there. And they're also getting an increase in supplies for the Common Core around math, writing, and ELA. So that represents about $135,000. Next slide. Then we go to the Wheelock School. Kind of like Franklin, there is a dramatic change. I mean, so they are getting the LD Collaborative. They're increasing their number of kids. And then there was also an OT that was inside the special ed cost center that we've moved in here because that's where they work. So it's more of an accounting thing. It's neutral in the budget, but at the same time, though, those costs came in. So when you look at the movement of the LD Collaborative, that OT, and then also that investment in the Common Core supplies, it leads to about $211,000, or about 10% increase in their budget. But they're getting more kids, and it's what they need. If we go to the next slide. Elementary General is basically the fund where there's certain activities that the elementary schools share, so that's what this one is. There is now going to be, we're going to start to rebuild our world language program in Keene Elementary Schools. We're going to start with kindergarten next year, so we need a part-time teacher to do that. So that's part of the $250,000, a very small part, about $24,000 of it. We basically had to adjust our teacher substitute costs, so that's part of the increases. We also are in the process of hiring a floating nurse. We're consistently without nurses when nurses go sick, and that's a problem. So we've adjusted that in this budget, and we're absorbing those costs in next year's budget. So this is the place where we represent the costs for the elementary schools. So if there's ever a nurse out in our elementary schools, we make sure we have someone there, so we solve that problem. And then also kind of an accounting thing. The special ed coordinator for the district for elementary schools used to be sitting in the special ed side of this budget, and we just moved it into here because that's where they spend their time. So that represents actually a significant change in the $250,000. And then we also had to make sure we fully funded our summer school transportation. So that's a big increase of $250,000, but it's what we need based on our schools. So next slide. Keene Middle School, not a lot of major changes. There's a $100,000 increase, or 1.5%. Some of that is, it's accounting again. We moved the Vistas teachers from their special ed part of the budget into their budget because that's where they work. That's the majority of the change here. There's some contractual increases that went along with the KEA contract. We covered part of the floating nurse for Keene Middle School, and then there's an additional sports stipend to kind of help the school run its program. So that's basically what happened at Keene Middle School. Not a lot of movement or activity there, kind of a minor increase. And we go to Keene High School. Keene High School, $635,000 change, around 4.6%. A lot of that is driven by the contract. We have about 140 Keene teachers in Keene High School, so if there's going to be an increase in salaries, a lot of it's going to get captured there. We are also putting in 2 monitors in Keene High School. So 1 monitor is for the hall monitor, basically after school. We want to make sure that there's always a presence in the building because there's a lot of things going on in this building on all hours a day, so we want to keep that presence. And then we want to make sure the library is open longer because a lot of kids should be getting homework done and getting their work done after school and have a place so they can do it. So we're basically making sure that we're doing the best we can to keep all the kids safe after school and have a place they can be. The floating nurse coverage is also part of the increase. We had to increase the time that we have our Chinese teacher in this year's budget, so we're just capturing it in next year's budget as well. But there are some reductions. I mean, we still are experiencing declining enrollment at Keene High School. I mean, we want to reverse that. We want to be able to attract more kids in the future. But based on declining enrollment and really looking at the program of studies and looking at things closely and looking at different departments, unfortunately, there is a reduction of a health and human service teacher from full-time to part-time, and also in our music teacher as well. But we were able to time those correctly with some retirements to not make this too dramatic of a shift for Keene High School. And they did absorb some costs, about $250,000 in that accounting change again, where there's a whole bunch of teachers sitting in the special ed cost center that we moved into Keene High School because that's where they work. So, total of a 4.6% increase, but a lot of it is what we need. Go to the next slide, Cheshire Career Center. Pretty minimal changes, about $50,000 or 3%. A lot of it's contractual and maybe a little bit on supplies. And again, going back to the declining enrollment problem, we are pulling back in the Applied Sciences department by 0.2 based on enrollment. And I think, hopefully we can figure out a way to reverse that in the future. Go into the next slide. Now we get to cost center 16 and 17, lots of big increases here. I think one of the things we started with is we're talking about investing in infrastructure. So if we're going to invest in our infrastructure, it's going to happen in this cost center. So there's about $1 million increase here, or 20% change. About $700,000 of it is in the elementary schools, but there's also, that's related to our life safety project, which we'll talk about in a little bit. There's also about $75,000 going into a new elevator at Fuller. There is, we have to put in some design work so we can fully figure out all the life safety work at our elementary school. That's about $125,000. We have to repair part of the roof at Keene High School. It's another $150,000. We're going to work on the alumni field grandstands, another $76,000. We're not going to have the IT department in the Mitchell House anymore. We're going to move them into Keene High School and better use our facilities. So that's going to cost about $175,000. And then we just have minor increases in contracts and that also drive part of this budget. And then we're trying to get back on a replacement cycle for our vehicles. So there's a big change there. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, and we can definitely answer all of them. But those are the big things going on in this cost center. Go to the next slide. Then we have the school board SAU costs. So they're up about $62,000, or about 3.4%. So this is where you have the school board salary, so those are level funded in here. We have to pay a little bit more in our auditing fees every year, so that's up about $8,500. We're a little bit busier when it comes to legal services, but we're level funding them. So the biggest change in this budget is obviously the increase of the SAU budget. The SAU budget is an entirely separate process that already got voted on, so we have to pay our share of that cost, and part of it is that budget is increasing, but part of it is the Keene share of the SAU is also growing. We're a larger part of that cost now. And that's basically what's driving about a $62,000 or $63,000 increase. And we'll go to the next slide. Public information, pretty minor increase of $442. So we didn't have any staff changes, and we're making some slight changes in how we spend our money around print material, but it's largely budget neutral. We'll go to the next slide. Then we have the general district. So there's a lot of things that are kind of lumped into this account. It basically spends the different funds across the district that we need to have. So there's a slight increases for our early retirement stipends of about $73,000. Transportation's level funded. But the reason why there's a big increase in here is when we built the KEA increases into our budget last year, we put them in this account, and then we pulled them out and put them at the schools this year. So that's why you see a huge decrease of about $700,000. So about $530,000 of those KEA increases were just automatically pulled out, and then right now we're pulling out the building and grounds transfer because there's a separate warrant article for that. So big change in that one, but it's all pretty explainable. A lot of it's just accounting. Go to the next slide. Curriculum and staff development is down a little bit. It doesn't mean we're not investing in it fully. We still have more than $200,000 we're investing in all of our teachers, and it goes back to like that first slide I went over. There's lots of things there that we're continuing to work for cohesively, and there's a lot of time we need to spend on professional development. And there's also, we get federal money for professional development in our Title IIA funds, and I think we're aligning them a lot better now than we did in the past, so we're able to save a little money there as well. So that's the reason why it's going down a little bit. Then we go to the next slide. Technology, another big mover. So technology is up about $423,000. We made a lot of investments last year. We now have the right people in place to make sure those investments are used well, and we actually fix a lot of our technology problems. So we're in the process of doing a lot of things this year, which we can go into lots of detail on. But next year, what we need to do is we need to increase our internet bandwidth. We're increasingly having more and more devices. I've got 2 phones on my right now. There's probably 300 devices in this room with just all of us. So we need to be able to increase our internet bandwidth. We have to also increase our wireless. We're going to start with Franklin, because that seems to have the most out-to-date in our elementary schools, and we need to fix Keene High School. So that's about $130,000 total between those 2 projects. It's hard to believe, but Keene Middle School's computers are already old. They're about 5 years old, and we're going to be having a 2-year replacement cycle of them, so about half of them will be replaced last year. So the computer replacements like Keene Middle School will begin. We didn't really fund that with our lease last year, so that's why we have to making sure we're building into the budget. That's about $108,000, and then we also have to upgrade our firewall. So that's, because we have to protect the content that comes in. And, I don't really know what I'm talking about there, but I'll do my best to defer to Dan. And then we go to the next cost center, special education. So big changes here. So some of it is out-of-district placements, some of it is just accounting. We looked very closely at our out-of-district placements. The number of kids in out-of-district placement dropped from about 37 to 28 at the time we were creating this budget. They're about in that place right now, so we're down in total kids that go to out-of-district placement. That's a great thing. That means the special ed department's working hard to keep all of our kids inside of our district, and that's what we want. So we're able to really figure out what we need. There's still a healthy buffer of about $300,000 to $400,000 in this budget. If things happen, then we can't handle kids. I mean, that does happen. That's kind of like the problem with this account. It's very hard to judge what's going to come our way. But there's a total reduction of about $611,000 in out-of-district placement, but we feel like we have what we need to be successful next year. Then the remaining $1 million in that change, another $460,000, is basically those accounting switches I talked about earlier. We're trying to make sure that this account is largely just out-of-district placement and a few other things, and if we had teachers and adults in this account, we're putting them in the cost centers they actually work at, so just trying to make it a little bit more sensible. Next slide. Preschool, minor change in preschool. It's down about $20,000, mostly because we're able to kind of change staffing from a psychologist to a school adjustment counselor, and that person works a little bit more closely with parents and families, so that saved us some considerable money. And as the preschool's shifting to Jonathan Daniels, we want to be able to offer more morning classes so we can better balance out our numbers. So we're going to have a fourth classroom teacher that only works 40% of the time. So the net result is down, but we're investing in that program pretty well. And the last cost center is English language learners. Pretty minor, about $10,000. Some of it's contractual, and then that's basically what drives that change there. Then we go to, sorry, not the last one. Then we go to debt service. Debt service is down total. Our interest costs increased by about $40,000, but our principal cost decreased by about $90,000. And so the total is about a $50,000 change. So that's all the cost centers, and I just want to take a little bit of time to talk about elementary restructuring next and what that all means. So when you look at this, we get to savings of $689,000 because we need 5 fewer teachers, 6 less at Jonathan Daniels, but there's an increase of that 1 at Franklin, so 5 net. We are reducing, the art, music, PE, media generalists, and reading specialists at Jonathan Daniels as well, because that's going from a fully staffed school to basically running half a school. So we're reducing that as well. And then a slight decrease in terms of personnel support and also some supplies. So the total is about $689,000. And right now, I do want to thank the board again for going along with the 2-year plan. It's the right plan. We have more than 100 teachers in Keene Elementary Schools, and right now, as we kind of play out what's going to happen if the budget is approved, there's maybe 2 impacted employees. That's 2%. I mean, that's really why we push so hard to have a 2-year plan to make this stable for the system. I don't doubt that closing Jonathan Daniels is a big change, but right now it's a stable change. And we need to keep it like that, and supporting this budget does that. So I think this is good news. I mean, obviously, we don't want to have any impacted employees, but we're able to work very well with the principals and teachers to kind of figure that out. So I think that's a really good thing to say. If we go on to the next slide. This is the student impact. So there again, Jonathan Daniels is going from 12 sections to 6 sections. Franklin is increasing by a section, and then Fuller, Simons, and Wheelock basically stay the same. Class size ranges largely stayed the same for all the schools. There's just some abnormalities in Jonathan Daniels. There's anywhere from 13 to 23 we're currently projecting, 17 to 22 at Franklin, 16 to 21 at Fuller, 17 to 21 at Simons, and 16 to 22 at Wheelock. But as you can see, the far majority of them are around 16, 17, and 18. So even though we're closing half the school, we're not seeing this dramatic rise in class size that people were so worried about. We're able to work with families individually and make this a stable change. And I think that's the point I really want to hit, a stable change that we can handle. So if we go to the next slide, how this plays out in different classrooms, it's just a different way of looking at it. There's a big range in JD, but Fuller, Franklin, and Simons and Wheelock all seem to be in that. The largest chunk tends to be in that 17 to 18 range. And there definitely are classes of 20 and 21 and 22, but there's also classes of 20 and 21 and 22 right now. So this is not a big major change. This is a stable change. The one group we're kind of keeping our eye on is the rising 5th grade at Wheelock. Right now there's 22 kids in there. There's 4 students moving from the LD Collaborative into that group. They spend 80 to 90% of their day in their LD Collaborative, so for 10 to 20% of the day, they will be with those other kids. So it would make 26, but we have additional adult support that can be there. And when class size does get that size, we have the ability to put more adult support in there, which is past practice. And we go to the last slide, I believe. It's just the total view. So we're up $642,000. That costs 3.8% in school tax increase because our costs are going up, but also our revenues went down. So it's 2 reasons, and I think Tim can speak to this a little bit better. This is our worst case scenario. I think the tax picture will only get better as the year goes along if we see a larger surplus on our spending side. So this is our worst case scenario, so I think that's a good thing to say. That means about 67 cents on the tax rate, or $18 and $10 for that. $67 for that $100,000 home. I think I've exhausted myself, so we're going to go to questions.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Bernie Novak, if I'm saying your name correctly.
Before you get up, Bernie, let me just summarize that. The next slide before that. Yeah. As Mr. Black had pointed out, this, by the way, is only related to Article number 1. And so Article number 1 represents a tax increase of 67 cents per thousand. So this is Article 1. Now, the questions are going to be related to Article 1 and the finance issue. And we have actually 3 experts. And the 3 experts are Ed Murdo, which handles the facilities. He's a facilities chair, and that's all related to money. We have Tim Rowe, who's the business administrator, and he's the finance fellow. And we have Mr. Dan Black, who just got up here, and he's for restructuring. So the types of questions you ask, I might very well pick on either one of these 3 people. Go ahead, Benny.
Okay, I'm Bernie Novak, 37 Myrtle Street here in Keene. I have a question to deal with last year's budget, the current year, fiscal 15, because we over appropriated money for the increase in insurance costs to what total, Tim?
Good. Tim, come up here.
So we usually budget for the guaranteed maximum rate increase as publicized by our health insurance carrier. And I'm trying to think I think that was about 6.5%. But of course, we didn't come into that. And there's about a $400,000 savings there.
Okay, did that get reappropriated by the board, or was it just turned into the surplus?
Turned into the surplus.
Okay, so that's going to be going right back into the current budget.
Yes, that will be going right back into the current budget. If you look at the revenue projection in your handout, we are projecting a revenue from that line, from surplus, of $1,750,000, and that is conservative, as Dan alluded to, because we would rather your tax rate go down from what you see on voting day rather than go up. Right now, actually, my financial report's showing about a $2.1 million surplus.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Next question.
I would like to recognize Steve Michael.
Okay.
Hi, Steve Maselli, 10 Aspen Street here in Keene.
My apologies.
That's okay. So my question is, if you could walk me through the decision to cut the music position here at Keene High from full-time to whatever it is. There's been a lot of rumors about whether it was going to be 3/4 time, half time. Has the enrollment gone down for the music program? Because my kids are in the music program. We're a little concerned scheduling for next year.
Mr. Black will handle this.
Yeah, unfortunately right now we have a music teacher running detention because we don't have enough kids in the music program. So I think, we have a retirement coming up in that department, so we're looking for new blood to come in and really breathe some life into there. So it doesn't impact the current classes because we don't have enough music classes running right now. Okay. Like at least the whole class. So we have part of a teacher's day is being spent in detention, like running detention rather than music.
But has the enrollment gone down? Like, is the position cut in half? Is it a half-time position?
No. So the position we're currently projecting for is 0.6. So they'd be able to cover basically the 2 music classes we have running right now. And hopefully, if that new person comes in and does well, we'll be back at a full-time program 16-17.
Okay, so this isn't because there was a teacher cut in the middle school, right? Went from 2 full-time to 1 part-time and 1 full-time.
That was in prior budgets. No one's...
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not gone up.
Nope.
It's still the same. So it could be that this would be permanent.
No, I mean, what I'm hoping is that the new person we bring in is able to rebuild the program and make it full-time again.
Okay, thank you. Oh, one more question.
Yep.
Has there been a person hired yet for that?
Nope. We have to pass the budget, then we have to go hiring.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'd like to recognize Joseph Marizoff.
I think someone over here addressed this before, but is this in Article 1, is it, if I understand Mr. Panza correctly, the difference you show, the 642,000, does not include difference caused by contractual changes? So that, as I understand it, this 850,000 difference that you have.
You mean the default budget, you mean?
Yes. But the default budget says it's the same as last year.
The default budget is the same as last year, which included your contractual agreements for the previous year. In other words, that budget did include all your contractual agreements, the default budget.
Right.
Okay?
But now you're saying this is even higher. You're saying that it's $200,000 higher what it was last year, because the difference you're showing now, what you're telling the public, is the difference is 642,000.
I know the answer to that, but I think the more detailed rendition will follow.
Okay.
That's a good question. If you, because the default budget and your budget can get confusing, but in our current budget is all the contractual obligations we're required to pay at the staffing levels that we presented. The default budget, if you turn to this blue packet, page, I know the pages aren't numbered, but it's page 7, right after that spreadsheet that's easy to find. You'll see official ballot budget comparison. I think this will answer your question. If not, just redirect me. But you can see the school budget of $64,529,015 at the top. The next one is $63,886,000. That's the current year budget that was voted. That should look familiar, and that's the starting point for a default budget, as you know. Then you can see what changes I made to that budget. If you look down.
Okay, I think I understand now. So you're saying that the number that they have in the warrant article was before the voted for contractual changes that were on other warrant articles?
No, it's all of the warrant articles that were voted for wrapped up into the operating budget.
Right.
So it's this year's budget with everything passed from last year.
Right, that's this year's budget. My concern is last year's. What we're showing is last year's budget.
Well,
last year's budget, now we're showing what was on warrant article 1 plus the increases due to the contractual changes. So that makes the difference.
But when I say this year budget, I mean the 14-15 budget. I think you're calling that last year's budget.
I see. Okay.
That's this year's budget. 14-15 is the $63 million, which was, if you look back at last March's meeting, you'll see is the combination of the operating budget and the KEA warrant article that was passed and so forth.
Okay.
And then you'll see what I added and subtracted, including all the negotiated labor contracts that I'm required to pay going into next year are added to this year's budget to come up with the default. Plus you have to add in the SAU expense, which is required. You can subtract the $100,000. We don't have to pay that. That was a one-time expense. And then special ed changes, up or down, which are required, must be added or subtracted. In this case, we subtracted $750,000, which is why our default budget is so much lower than our requested budget. Does that make sense?
A little bit. I'll have to think about it again. Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Oh, last thing I wanted to ask you, are these displays available to the public, the ones that aren't in here?
That's right. They're all posted on our website.
The website?
Yep.
Yes. Thank you.
Ann Zott, please. I'd like to recognize Ann.
Ann Zott, 211 Chapman Road, Keene. Just want to say I think this budget is very responsible, very stable, and I commend you for moving forward on restructuring. My question is for Ed Murdo. My big concern was the heat at the elementary schools, and do you have a capital improvement plan as to when you think money will be directed towards fixing the heat at Fuller School, Simon School, and I believe Wheelock and Franklin?
We do. So our plan for renovating the elementary schools is to do it over the next several years. So in the current budget and what you saw in the buildings and grounds and maintenance accounts, we do have funds to do work this year in Jonathan Daniels School, primarily for the purpose of relocating the preschool, which has to happen before everything else. And this year we will address the heating plant at Fuller School. And there's also money in there to do design for the future years that are coming. So if future boards continue what we've got planned now over the next 4, 5, 6 years, we will be spending money from the results from the restructuring to do renovation every summer in the 4 elementary schools until it's done.
Okay, next question. Any other questions?
Amy LePierre, please. I'd like to recognize her.
Amy LaPierre, 61 Wilder Street. My question's for Mr. Black, and it's probably clarification. I might have missed it when you first started talking. You talked about the teachers that are going to be transitioning to other schools or what's going to be happening there. I really never heard you talk about the kids, and I'm curious, and like I said, maybe you've already talked about this. I'm curious what's being done to accept about 75 children into wherever they're going to be going from JD.
Yeah, actually that number has decreased. So there's basically about 60 kids, maybe 62, 63, district-wide that are changing schools next year. A majority of them are at Jonathan Daniels, moving out. And then there's a few other variances at a couple schools we won't be able to carry based on some of the other movements. So it's about 63, and we've notified all those families and basically let them know of the changes coming up. So 75 kids coming in.
No, where are the children that are going to JD now?
Yep.
Like there are 36 kindergartners from JD that are be going into a first grade. Where are they going, and how is that being accommodated at the other end?
No, so any kid that's in K1, 2, 3, or 4 at Jonathan Daniels who basically lives within Jonathan Daniels zones in Keene, they're staying there. So the incoming kindergartners next year would either be at Fuller or Simons, depending on where they live. Basically, Maple Acres families, if they're a kindergarten kid, would be going to Fuller. So there are some families that are leaving JD a year early because they have incoming kindergartners, and we're not going to split up families. So they're going to move to Fuller a year earlier. And then the Tanglewood neighborhood and then everything west of Route 12 would be moving to Simons. So those new families.
So let me understand. The kindergarten children who are at kindergarten at JD right now?
No, those kindergartners right now would be in first grade.
All 36 in one first grade classroom?
No, there are some that are in Surrey that are moving to Wheelock.
So I guess I'm sorry, I'm not making myself clear.
Yep.
So are the classrooms at Wheelock and Fuller that you just mentioned, are they going to be larger in size to accommodate these kids?
Can you go to the, that one slide? Go to the next one. Yeah, right there. No, I mean, we have the room because this year's kindergarten, I think we're averaging, I think we have like 51 kids at Fuller and we have about 54, 55 at Simons. So the addition, so a lot of the kids that are coming out of, that are in the current kindergartners, in JD that are coming out. About 8 or 9 of them are moving to Wheelock, and Wheelock has the room to have two full rooms, and then the other remaining 4 or 5 are being split between Fuller and Simons. So you have basically 4 or 5 kids probably going to Fuller or Simons, and then about 8 or 9 going to Wheelock.
And this question may be way too late asking this, and I'm just curious. Was there ever any consideration given to redistricting the whole city rather than having Jonathan Daniels be the only school impacted by this?
Well, I think it's all about stable change. I think Jonathan Daniels is a school being closed. I think we looked at it. But based on the current demographics right now, we didn't really need to change everything else in the city. We don't really have enough kids to be able to do a massive change like you're talking about. We can definitely fit all the kids we have right now in 4 schools, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Panza. I have no other requests for questions. Are there any more questions? Seeing none, we'll move to Article 2, which I will read.
I move to restrict reconsideration of Article 1.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Article 2 states, shall the district approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Board of Education and the Keene Association of Principals and Supervisors, also known as CAPS, and accordingly shall the district raise and appropriate the sum of $74,357, such amount required to fund in fiscal year 2015-16 the increased costs of such agreement over the funds that would be paid at current staffing levels in accordance with the current collective bargaining agreement. At current staffing levels, the increased cost of the new agreement for its term of 3 years is estimated to be $33,939 in 16-17 and $39,534 in 17-18. Dawn, I'd like to recognize Dawn. Where's she? Oh, there she is, okay. Would you like to speak to this?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So the details behind the CAPS negotiation, I was fortunate to be a member of that CAPS negotiating team. And the CAPS is the Keene administrators, principals, and supervisors. It consists of 20 personnel who are in management and leadership positions within the Keene School District. So the impacts that you'll see and the changes, so for salaries, for 2015-2016, the total compensation increase is 2.61%. The salary increase is 1.6% across the group, and really the difference and the changes are representing equity adjustments with the salary ranges. These ranges have not been reviewed, revisited in a number of years, and we found as we looked across the state of New Hampshire, we were really not equal. So to hire talent, to maintain talent in our school district, we felt we needed to shift and increase some of those salary ranges. For 2016 to 2017, the total compensation increase is 1.5%. That's a salary increase of 2.1%. It's offset by increased employee health contributions to a district maximum of 80% of plan chosen. So we've actually gone to 80%, 20% the employees are covering. 2017 to 2018, the total compensation increase is 1.72%. That's a salary increase of 2.5%, and again, offset by capping the maximum salary in each job classification. So the health and dental insurance, the details behind this is employees pay a greater share of their health insurance for each of the first 2 years. All employees will pay at least 20%, which is definitely a change from before, or more of their health insurance in years 2 and 3. The district must offer the HMO 1 plan, but may choose the additional plans of its choice. Health insurance buyout, amount paid to employees securing insurance elsewhere will increase from $2,500 to $6,000. And language changes offers the district protection from the risk of the health insurance excise tax known as the Cadillac tax. And Tim, I don't know if you want to explain what the Cadillac tax is?
So we felt this was important protection for Keene District. Under Affordable Health Care Act, there is a penalty that comes into effect in 2017 for any plan that is viewed a Cadillac plan or costs over a set amount at that time. The district could be assessed a 40% excise tax on that plan. Many of you have probably heard of this. So the board and the association came up with a language to protect from that basically allows the board and the association to opt out of those plans and put in a plan that was not eligible to receive the Cadillac tax. So we think that's an important protection for Keene going forward.
Thank you. So other provisions, the long-term disability, the district's obligation to continue the health insurance contribution for employees who are out and eligible for long-term disability, reduced from 60 months to 24 months. Long-term employees shall receive equity adjustment after 10 years of position-specific service or 8 years for assistant positions. Tuition reimbursement fund, which will now include professional development, increases from $3,500 to a group total of $13,500. So it was $10,000, we went up to $13,500. So in 2015, 2016, the district will need to raise and appropriate an additional $57,275 for 2015-2016 pay and benefits as a result of the contract. This will result as an increase of 3 cents on the educational property tax rate, resulting in a $3.10 annually in additional property taxes on a $100,000 home if the assessment remains constant from 2015 to 2016. The approximate increase costs for the next 2 years are $33,939 and $39,534. So to conclude, that would be 70 cents on the tax rate increase for a total tax of $18.13. And that's for the overall budget increase. Okay. Do I go? Oh, do you have any questions?
I don't have any requests for questions before me, but does anybody have any questions about Article 2 specifically? Please state your name and address.
Anzot, 211. This is a question for Tim Rohr.
211 what?
Chapman Road.
Thank you.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Tim, regarding the Cadillac tax, this would affect every bargaining group. So is that language in the KEA agreement as well?
That language is not in the KEA agreement, but it is in all the agreements that we're presenting today. But the KEA will be renegotiating about that time.
About that time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Did I see a hand over here? Nope, maybe not. Any other questions? Seeing none, we will move on to the next article, which is Article 3. Mr. Parent.
I move to restrict reconsideration of Article 2.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Ayes have it. Article 3. Shall the district, if Article 2 is defeated, authorize the Board of Education to call one special meeting at its option to address Article 2 cost items only? This is one of those house cleaning articles that we see every year. Are there any questions about Article 3, or does anybody want to present to that? Dawn? Yes. Name and address, please.
Conan Soliday, 132 Kennedy. Could you explain the meeting in detail, what goes on, and what is decided?
Is this a question for me?
For any of the board members, or Tim.
This meeting, what happened?
If the special meeting is called to come back together,
Correct.
then we would explain, we would have to go back and renegotiate, and then we would bring what our negotiations was back to everyone to address that, and then we would vote there.
You have another ballot vote.
And you'd have another ballot vote later on. But we have to, if this is allowed, then we have to go back, renegotiate, bring it back to the community, address it again, and then we have a vote later on.
Right, that was my question, whether it
Okay.
came back to the people or not.
Yes.
Has this ever happened in the past before?
Yes. When I first joined the board 8 years ago, we renegotiated at least 3 contracts.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Other questions for Article 3? Seeing none, Mr. Parent? I didn't want you to get too comfortable, Ted.
I suppose I move to restrict reconsideration of Article 3.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Article 4. Shall the district approve the cost items included in the collective bargaining agreement reached between the Board of Education and the Association of Tutors, and accordingly shall the district raise and appropriate the sum of $57,937, such amount required to fund in fiscal year 2015-2016 the increased cost of such new agreement over the funds that it would be paid at current staffing levels in accordance with the current collective bargaining agreement. At current staffing levels, the increased cost of the new agreement for its term of 4 years is estimated to be $43,971 in 16-17, $42,476 in 17-18, and $46,723 in 18-19. Are there any questions? Well, let me recognize Chris Coates to speak to the article first before I address questions.
All right, thank you. I had the honor of negotiating the tutors contract, and I appreciate the work as I was once a tutor in the district many years ago out at Jonathan Daniels. So it was always, I think this is the 3rd time I've negotiated the contract too. The Keene Association Tutors is a union consisting of 135 personnel who are employed by the direct support to students throughout the Keene School District. The proposed Keene Association of Keene Tutors Agreement is a 4-year deal. You can read the increases in front of you. The maximum step of a newly hired tutor may be placed on the salary schedule only at step 3. The longevity stipend is discontinued and added into the salary schedule. Employees who earn or currently hold a New Hampshire teaching certificate or a New Hampshire para-educator certificate shall receive an additional hourly amount of 10 cents in year 1, 15 cents in year 2, 20 cents in year 3, and 25 cents in year 4. Next, please. Health insurance continues to be offered to full-time tutors. Language offering eligible tutors health insurance has been amended to require at least 20% contribution. Language changes offers district protection from the risk of health insurance excise tax, which was explained to you earlier. Next, please. A tutor's personnel file may no longer be purged at the employee's request after the 10 years. A paid holiday remains at 6, but the day after Christmas has been substituted in place of Memorial Day. They felt that this was important to them as it's a big break. Christmas is a 2-week break normally, and they wanted to have the ability to have some revenue coming in. The association is invited to participate in the creation of an annual school district calendar. Recall procedures affecting any tutor who has been reduced to or laid off have been revised to require a tutor to actively seek reemployment within the following school year. Seniority and benefit rights are maintained at the level which an employee had obtained prior to leaving if they are recalled during the same period, and the disability language is further clarified. So the district will need to raise, as he stated before, the $57,397, which is 3 cents, which is $3.11 on a 100,000 home. And the next 3 years would be $43,971, $42,476, and $46,723. And as you can see, this is how it breaks down. So I'll let you look for a second, then I'll ask for questions. Questions?
Got one coming. Whoever's name is on that sheet, why don't you step forward and state your name and address? Save a little time.
Ellen J. Host, 34 Shadow Lane.
Thank you.
And my
Ellen.
question is, are any of the tutors actually eligible for this health insurance?
No.
I have no other question requests. Are there any questions? Where? Go ahead.
Joseph Mirzoff, 50 Summit Road. If I understand this correctly, the 43,000 the first year, 44,000 the first year, 43,000, 42,000 the second year. When it gets to the second year, these two are added together, if we compared it to this year, so that the increase in cost in the second year over this year would be 86,000. Is that, am I correct? That, so the way this is expressed, it looks like it could be taken two ways. This way, it looks like, you know, we're going to have a $40,000 increase, and then that's about what it's going to be forever. But there's accumulation here. That the second year we have twice, the third year we have 3 times. So this is a communication issue that, and you do it with all the contracts. You did it with the first one that came up. You did that also. It was like 33,000, 39,000, and I don't know how to clarify this, but this makes it look like less than it is. And we had the same thing with the teacher's contract last year, where you said it was 500,000, 500,000, 500,000, when it was really 500,000, $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. So I don't know how to rectify this.
Well, it seems like you just rectified it. We don't put this on there to change or dissuade. We show additional costs year to year, which we're required to present it like this, in this format, with this wording, based on statute, for how we're supposed to sanitize or express additional costs. But you're right, the additional costs are expressed in how much additional it is each year of the contract.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. The second thing I wanted to ask, with these collective bargaining agreements, do you get any sort of impact about quality of service? Because, you know, I appreciate unions. I appreciate what they do for the employees. But is there some sort of sense that performance will be an input to what the board decides? In other words, if a unit is doing a good job, we might want to give it more than if it's doing a tacky job. And this would be for all the units.
I mean, I think that's a trend throughout the United States, but, you know, that's a slow process. And first you have to have an evaluation system that can make those determinations. And we've made huge strides on that, and it seems to be that's the way things are moving.
Oh, so you do have that. You do have some sort of evaluation system for each of the units.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Mr. Freeman.
Yes, Ian Freeman, 63 Emerald Street. I'd like to motion to place this article on the ballot as worded.
It's on the ballot as worded without your motion.
Okay, so we don't have to vote on that?
No, unless somebody amends it today.
Also, point of order, isn't there I guess a request in to have a secret vote instead of voice votes?
There is a request.
There was one from the
There's
board
another one.
Oh, there was a second one?
Your request, Mr. Freeman, was for paper ballots on votes, including motions to reconsider and challenges to rulings of the chair. I take your latter comment to mean rulings that I make. We haven't had a motion to reconsider yet, so...
I believe that says all votes, does it not?
It says all votes. I'm not going to recognize your request with respect to motions to restrict reconsideration. It's not a substantive motion, and it's not a motion that justifies the time it'll take to cast a ballot vote on a restriction motion. So that part of your request is denied, and we will have paper ballots on all votes when the time comes.
I'd like to challenge your decision.
Fine. There's a challenge to the chair, and the challenge is that Mr. Freeman wants us to vote on, by paper ballot, on all motions to restrict reconsideration. So now you need your purple sheets. If you would please. Oh, is there a second to that motion? Thank you. Seeing no second, the motion does. Okay, all right, we have a second. You need to use ballot question B at the bottom of the first page of the purple sheet. If you want to overrule the chair, vote yes. If you want to affirm the chair, vote no. Is everybody clear about that?
One more time.
Mr. Freeman's motion is to overrule my decision not to have paper ballots on motions to restrict reconsideration. Is everybody clear about that? I'm ruling that it's a procedural motion that doesn't require a secret ballot. And he wants to overturn that so that we take secret ballots on motions to reconsider. Now, if you agree with him, vote yes. If you do not agree with him, vote no. What? Ballot B, as in boy. It's at the bottom of the first page. Please use that ballot. The boxes are in the rear. Mr. Parcells is standing by one, and these folks over here are standing by another. If we may have the meeting back to order, please. There were 7 votes in favor of the motion to overrule and 94 against. The motion fails. We will now turn to Article 5, which is basically the same type of an article as Article 3 was, and it reads, shall the district, if Article 4 is defeated, authorize the Board of Education to call one special meeting at its option to address Article 4 cost items only.
Before you get to that, I move to restrict reconsideration of Article 4.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Mr. Roberts.
Were we voting on the motion to overrule the... We voted on the motion to overrule you, right?
Right.
Okay, but did we come back and vote on Article 4 by itself?
We don't have to vote on it.
Okay.
No changes.
Yeah.
We're good. So I read Article 5. Motion to restrict reconsideration of Article 4 is passed. Are there any questions or presenters for Article 5 for the board? I should look at my sheet. Chris, sorry.
I mean, if there's questions, I'll take it, but we've already touched on it. So I have none.
Okay, nothing further to add. Are there any questions about Article 5? Mr. Parent, you're standing by the mic, eager to speak, I bet.
I move to restrict reconsideration of Article 5.
Second.
Motion to restrict reconsideration of 5, seconded. Is all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Article 6. Mr. Murdo will speak to that, but I'll read it first. Shall the district approve the cost items included in the agreement reached between the Board of Education and the Keene paraprofessionals and specialists, and accordingly shall the district raise and appropriate the sum of $52,150, such amount required to fund the fiscal year 15-16, the increased cost of such agreement over the funds that would be paid at current staffing levels in accordance with the current agreement. At current staffing levels, the increased cost of the new agreement for its term of 3 years is estimated to be $49,990 in 16-17 and $19,304 in 17-18. This is an appropriation in addition to Article 1, the operating budget article. Mr. Murdo, please.
Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so I had the privilege of being on the negotiation team with the paraprofessionals group. The paraprofessionals are a meet and confer group. That means they are not part of a union, but they are a group that we work with together. It's a very diverse group. It includes some instructional folks, a number of non-instructional people, includes our public information officer, some licensed practical nurses, some of our network people. So it's a very diverse group. And prior to this negotiation, they had a number of different pay scales, a very complicated process. And I do want to thank our business administrator, Tim Rohr, and our human resources director, Nancy Deutsch, for the effort that they went through to look at equivalent kinds of jobs in the region and how much they paid, and to really try to simplify and consolidate the various pay tables, and they did a great job doing this. So we've adjusted several of the pay tables. No one will receive any less money than what they've received in the past, but some positions may be frozen until the pay schedule catches up with their particular job and time and service. So you can see the basic contents of the negotiation. They did have a longevity stipend that they were paid. That's simply been incorporated into the hourly pay schedule rather than have it as a separate item. That last bullet there, these are folks, at least the instructional paras, that we hope to get some teachers from in the future. So we want to encourage them to pursue their education and to actually achieve teaching licenses. Okay, next slide. This is similar to the other groups we've already talked about. These employees will be paying more for their health care. The buyout has been increased, and there's the same language on the Cadillac tax. Next slide. Long-term disability, again, similar to the other groups. We're reducing the amount of time from 84 months to 18. These folks did not have they only had one paid professional day. We're going to give them 2 in the out years of the contract. Some of their tuition reimbursement funds will also be shifted to allow them to do more professional development. We're adding a perfect attendance bonus, and this group did not have a consistent evaluation. So Mr. Mirzov's question before about that, this group will now have a consistent evaluation across the district. Okay. And then in summary, this is what the warrant article is asking the voters to approve. And then the next slide shows if this article, along with all the previous articles, are all passed, then this would be the tax impact. This particular article is 3 cents on the tax rate. Okay. Any questions?
There's a request from Chuck Weed, if you would like to speak, Mr. Weed. I can't see where you are. Oh, I'm sorry. Then any question? I don't have any written requests for this article. Right there.
Hi, Phyllis Marinoff, 30 Fairview Street, Keene. I just had a clarification. The other collective bargaining agreements had the special meeting amendment after it, like Article 5, Article 3. So I'm wondering why Article 6 doesn't have the same type of special meeting for defeated.
It's because the law does not allow it for a group that's not a unionized bargaining group. Is that?
Oh, because Article 6 says collective bargaining agreement. Is it just the way you worded it?
It is a collective bargaining agreement, but this particular group is not an organized union.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
Amy LaPierre, 61 Wilder Street. This is just, I'm just curious, how many people are we talking about that fit into the para group?
93.
And how many people, I'm going back to Article 4, how many people fit into the tutor group?
135.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah, and actually both of these can fluctuate as daily, really, as we go through the year and depending on what the requirements are. Yeah.
Are there any other questions with respect to Article 6, please? Seeing none, we will move along. Mr. Parent.
Move to restrict reconsideration of Article 6.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Article 7. Before I recognize Mr. Murdo once again, I'll read it. Shall the district raise and appropriate the sum of $100,000 to be added to the school buildings maintenance fund for the purpose of repairing and maintaining the school buildings within the district as established by the voters at the 2010 annual meeting. This sum will come from the June 30th, 2015 unexpended balance of the 14-15 appropriations available for transfer on July 1st, 2015, and will not be raised by taxation in 2015-2016. Mr. Murdo.
Thank you. So this article is something that has been on the warrant for the last 4 years. This will be the 5th year. Basically, this allows us to establish a rainy day fund, if you will, some funds that we will have for unexpected situations that may come up with our buildings and grounds to allow us to deal with those. The law does require that before we actually make a withdrawal from the fund, we hold a public hearing on the matter and receive comments before the board makes a decision. So any questions on Article 7?
I have no written request for questions with respect to Article 7. I see with one hand over here.
John Tonkinson, 18 Newberry Lane. How much is currently in the fund?
$400,000.
And at what point will the board stop adding money to the fund?
That actually depends on future boards. They could, at any point in any given year when we put the budget together, when we put the meeting together, we would consider this, and we may or may not decide to do that.
Mr. Coates.
Yes, it's been as high as I think about $850,000, $875,000 that we utilize for the heating system at the high school. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, Wayne has the history better than I do. But it was never our intention to build something up. It's our intention to utilize that as projects like the restructuring of the elementary schools. And, that's where we'll be utilizing those monies.
Okay, I think it is also a little misleading to say that it won't be raised from taxes because the part of your revenue is the surplus. And if you're reducing that surplus by $100,000, that does need to be accounted for. So I think that's a little misleading.
Right, and I realize the language does say that it will not be raised for taxation in the upcoming tax year. So the revenue was raised in prior tax years, and it does, if we do not return this money to next year's budget, it does result in a tax increase. That is correct. But the language in here is correct. It's not raised by taxation in the coming year.
Did she still have a question? Mr. Roberts.
Just for a little technicality, because I think you're both correct. If we have unanticipated revenue more than we expected, and then we put that revenue into this fund, that revenue had no effect on taxes. If anything, it's going to save taxes going forward. So if we didn't have excess revenue, but we just saved money from expenses, that would be a tax increase. One of the either it was going to result in a tax increase, but if the money comes from unanticipated new revenue or additional revenue, that would not.
So perhaps a better way to state what I just said is, if the voters approve this and it goes into the fund, then we will not defer taxes next year.
Yes, ma'am.
We got it confused enough yet?
Amy LaPierre, 61 Wilder Street. So I guess my question's twofold after what Mr. Tonkinson just said. What happens if this is not approved, if this article is not approved by the voters?
Then that much money would be presumably in the surplus. This assumes that we're going to have that in surplus at the end of this year. If we don't approve it, then that money would go back to the taxpayers. Basically, it would be rolled into the following year's budget.
So it wouldn't affect Article 1? It wouldn't affect the whole total operating budget?
It does not affect Article 1 at all, but what it does affect the tax rate next year if we don't do this, there'd be about a 3-cent difference in your tax rate next year. Yeah.
So following up on what Mr. Tonkinson asked a minute ago about the idea that this fund keeps building and building, am I correct in saying that? What Mr. Coates just said, it can build up to like $800,000, I think you said, Mr. Coates, something like that?
Go ahead.
It built up because we had the ability to take the monies that when we sold the middle school, the SAU, that's why it built up that high. It's not our intention to just create this capital reserve fund that just has millions of dollars in it, where we want to raise those funds to utilize those for projects, so that we don't. I mean, it's helped us so we don't have to bond, we don't have to take on more debt.
I understand that now, but
yep.
What I'm wondering is, and what kind of my caution is, what I'm hearing is that the board has this discretionary fund that then they can use for whatever they want to without coming to the voters.
Well, that's actually, first of all, it can only be, this particular fund can only be used for repairs to our buildings, right, for capital improvements. And the law does require us to hold a public hearing to solicit input from the voters before we do this. And the voters can limit the fund at any point. If future boards continue to make this request every year, the voters can say, no, there's enough in there. Or the board may decide not to make the request in any given year.
But Mr. Coates said that, I think maybe I misunderstood, that this is what was used to do the school restructuring, to the closing of Jonathan Daniels.
No, not at all.
It could.
Well,
I mean, any of it could be used for any project that we have out there.
Right. It could be used for any construction work, maintenance and repair work to any of our buildings. It could not be used for other purposes of restructuring, such as staffing issues and curriculum or that sort of thing. It can only be used for the building. So the closure of Jonathan Daniels allows us to have some money in the budget without increasing taxes to do some building work, but it's really two independent actions, if you will.
So if we vote down this article, does that mean Jonathan Daniels won't close?
This has no bearing on the closing of Jonathan Daniels. It means that there will not be $100,000 go into this fund this year if you vote no.
All right, just trying one more time.
Susan.
Ed, correct me that though, if I'm wrong here, if we got into, sorry, can you hear me? If we got into Fuller and the work that we're planning on doing in Fuller, and we realized that there was additional expenses there, but it was advantageous financially for us to co-op that work with the work that we were doing, we could use money from this fund for that.
We could hold a public hearing,
right,
make a proposal to withdraw some money from this fund to spend on work on the Fuller building. Yes, we could do that.
So it's money that we can use when it makes financial sense to do it. It's money we can use when something is unanticipated and it comes up. So it's just, in my mind, it's the way you budget for things you know are going to happen, but you don't know what it is. You know that there's going to be those kinds of, unforeseen circumstances.
Are there any other questions with respect to Article? Mr. Roberts.
Another way to look at it, when we were talking about repairing the boilers at the high school, if for some reason the boiler went down in December and it was going to cost $600,000 to repair the boiler, and we didn't have any reserve fund, we would have to take it out of the current operational budget. And then if we didn't have excess in it, we would have to make some hard decisions on what we would have to do without for the rest of the school year, because by law we can't exceed the budget unless there's a special meeting. But if the boilers go down, we have to fix the boilers right at that time, regardless of cost. And like you said, the boilers are $800,000. If we had to take $800,000 out of this year's school budget in December, the voters would be after us, the parents would be after us, because we'd have to take an $800,000 cut in the school operational budget. So this is one of the big things we're doing, is we want to not only anticipate for maintenance problems or something that pop up, it helps us plan, but it also doesn't put the school curriculum at risk.
Are there any other questions with respect to Article 7? Seeing none, I see Mr. Parent. Yes.
I move to restrict reconsideration of Article 7.
Motion being made and seconded. All those in favor of restriction on Article 7, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
I can do this next one, Carl.
Article 8 reads, shall the district establish an expendable trust fund under the provisions of RSA 198:20-C to be known as a Special Education Trust Fund for the purpose of addressing unanticipated special education costs as may arise in the course of a fiscal year, and name the school board as agents to expend from this fund, and shall the district raise and appropriate the sum of $1 to be placed in the fund with such amount to come from the June 30th, 2015 unexpended balance of the 2014-2015 appropriations.
So this article is very similar to the last one, but Article 7 is a fund that we established several years ago. So this article, we're asking to establish a similar fund, but in this case for the purpose of unanticipated special education costs. We have had situations in the past. It was 2 or 3 years ago. We had an unexpected number of out-of-district placements that total about $800,000 that we had not planned for. I think we were able to cover about half of that, but then the rest of it had to come out of the existing budget, which meant reducing other programs in order to fulfill those requirements. So we're asking to establish the fund, only put $1 in it. We're not asking this year to put any additional funds in it, but we'd have that fund established so that in the future we could put some funds away, and it's similar to the previous article, for these unanticipated requirements. Any questions?
Ed,
Use
isn't
the
this
microphone.
isn't this a practice that lots of districts use to try to balance out special ed ups and downs?
Yes, it is, and I believe other districts in SAU 29 do have it. All of the other districts in SAU 29 do have this. Yeah. Mr.
Are there any other questions? John?
I don't disagree with the concept of either this fund or the previous fund.
Name and address.
John Tonkinson, 18 Newberry Lane. It certainly would have made my life easier to have these funds about 12 or 13 years ago. However, I would urge the board to set a policy that the size of these funds be limited to a certain percentage of the operating budgets that they impact. So for the previous one, whatever the facility's budget is, district-wide, I would, if you want to come out at 25 or 30% of that would be the limit of the fund. And for this fund, whatever the special, I assume special education is still about 20% of the overall budget. If you could limit the magnitude of that, I think that does two things. One, even though the intention is not to grow them forever, that can happen. They can be viewed as a slush fund, and they also prevent creative solutions. If you've got money and you've got a kid and you got money available, sometimes it's easier to just send them out of district and the problem is solved, as opposed to finding a creative solution that might be more economical. So when you get back to work after the budget is passed, I would urge a policy to limit the magnitude to a percentage of the budget.
Any other questions or comments with respect to Article 8? Sorry, thank you. Seeing none. Mr. Parent.
Move to restrict reconsideration of Article 8.
Motion made and seconded to restrict Article 8. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Article 9. This is an article that appears every year on our warrant. Shall the district authorize the Board of Education to lease or purchase land or land and buildings for school purposes, as such land or land and buildings may be adjacent to any school buildings within the district and or adjacent to streets which border such school buildings within the district? Ed, are you speaking to that?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I thank Jim Carley for keeping me up here so long. So as Mr. Hoppick said, this is an article that has been on the warrant for many years. It simply allows us, if an opportunity arises and a budding property becomes available for sale, that we could take action on that. We're not actually required to, but we've always said that if such a thing happened, we would have a public hearing again before we do that. And as you know, several of our particular elementary schools, the sites are very small, things are very tight. It might be advantageous in the future to acquire some land. Maybe someone else knows, but I don't believe we've ever actually done this, even though it's been on the warrant for many years. North Campus of the high school we did at that time. That's right. Okay. Any questions on Article 9?
Mr. Parent.
Move to restrict reconsideration of Article 9.
Motion made and seconded to restrict Article 9, reconsideration of Article 9. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Now, Article 10 is submitted by petition.
Joe, just before we get to go there, can I have one?
Yeah, Mr. Coates.
Thank you. Just quickly, or not quickly, just a few minutes. Past practice some years ago was to recognize teachers that are retiring. And I understand why we got away from that. A lot of those teachers who do retire haven't told their colleagues yet that is what they've put in for. So I respect that. But this year we have 14 teachers retiring and taking early retirement. And I just want to, on behalf of the Keene Board of Education, thank each one of them for the service to the Keene School District. And I also, more importantly, want to thank them for the difference they made in a child's life. So thank you to those teachers that are retiring. We also have one other retirement this year, and there's a man who's led us here at the SAU 29 who is leaving us, who's retiring at the end of the year, Wayne Woolridge. He's a man who does not need the spotlight and hates accolades. He just does his job. And last year we recognized John Harper. We had a big picture and gave him some nice things, and it was a good thing that we did. Wayne doesn't like that, but we're not letting him get away. So I asked the board for remarks. I've asked some of his colleagues for remarks, and I'd like to read those to you just to honor him and thank him. Just historically, he's been 25 years of service to the district. He was assistant principal at Keene High School, principal at Keene High School, principal at Jonathan Daniels, assistant superintendent of towns, co-superintendent, and he's a superintendent currently. He holds a BA in English and in personal communication. He holds a master's in educational leadership. He has his educational leadership and superintendent certification. During his tenure, the Keene Middle School came to fruition. Elementary restructuring process, which has been a huge, huge project. He has been able to help us and walk us through that. He has helped with scheduling changes at Keene High School and having us go to the Common Core and the teacher evaluation systems. He has strong involvement and knowledge of the legislative process as pertains to education. Most enjoyable for him, though, is when he's in the classroom. When he has the opportunity to sit in the classroom and just read a book to the kids. That's where he finds his inner peace in all this madness that we have in the Keene School District. Some of my colleagues said Wayne's manner and professionalism brought a much-needed calmness. Wayne has allowed his assistants to implement their ideas with just the right amount of supervision. They've really blossomed to the great benefit of the district. Wayne was like a captain on the bridge of a ship, guiding his vessel through rough and at times uncharted waters. He was always good at maintaining stability and getting us to the destination. Wayne was tireless. The times he spent day and night visiting school districts and going to meetings gave him an instant rapport with those he dealt with. There wasn't anyone he didn't listen to. Wayne's work ethic is beyond commendable. 60-plus hour work weeks are his norm, and he gives his time with equanimity and without complaint. Wayne has built trusting relationships with the faculty and administration and parents. His commitment and dedication to the Keene School District is more than commendable. It is amazing. He truly cares about the school district, the children, and the community. He shows it and does it each and every day. I would also add that his ability to stay calm and directed, no matter how difficult or unnerving the circumstances. I have never heard him say a bad word or unkind thing about anyone, even though there have been plenty of times and reasons for him to do so. His ability to help boards and stay focused on doing the best they can for the students. He is never imposing his opinion on the boards, but professionally offering his thoughts and ideas when asked, and being a welcoming and personal leader, and always willing to meet and speak with board members and parents. He's an all-around good guy and true professional. And I didn't have time for someone to run off, so I'm on my phone here. He recognizes talent, and rather than micromanage, he enables his principals and teachers to lead, to use those talents to help each child achieve. He encourages and supports his leaders in a quiet yet firm and confident manner. Wayne recognizes a strong effort and is quick to compliment others for the hard work they do. I've never met a person with a wealth of history and knowledge of the organization that he has. Because of this, people believe what he says and are confident in following him as a leader. And last, if I can do it right, there it is. I think Wayne was able to be the wise sage for the district and guide it through the recent major changes by capitalizing on his knowledge of the history of Keene, while also being able to look forward to push an agenda that is centered around the needs of our students. Wayne has always been a caring and nice person that anyone in Keene can approach and talk with concerns on their mind. He listens and he cares. Wayne also has amazing stamina. Somehow he has put in more than 100 nightly meetings per year on top of his day job while covering a district's huge geographic area at the same time. Not a small feat. So Wayne, I just want to say thank you from all of us, I think, in the room for your leadership and for your caring of all the students, and that's what it comes down to. So thank you very much, Wayne.
Thank you. And Mr. Woolwich, thank you very much for your service to this board and to the district. Now, turning to Article 10, this is submitted by petition. It's a tax impact article, and therefore its wording is required by statute, so there'll be no amendments permitted with respect to the language. And it reads as follows: shall the district adopt the provisions of RSA 32:5-B and implement a tax cap whereby the governing body or budget committee shall not submit a recommended budget that increases the amount to be raised by local taxes based on the prior fiscal year's actual amount of local taxes raised by more than 0.5%. This requires a 3/5 majority on March 10th. Does anybody have any well, actually I have 3 or 4 names already on who want to speak to that, and I recognize Chuck Weed first. I think I have you now at the right article, right?
Yes, thank you.
Very well.
Chuck Weed, 28 Damon Court, and I've been so happy to live in Keene with the excellent schools, and I've seen 5 children go through those schools, and I think all of them are very successful, and I attribute much of their success to the start they got in the schools. And that sort of prefaces what I hope to say here, and that is that I've come to believe that the Keene School Board is very responsible. I think they love education, and that's what's most important about them, but they're also very frugal, and I've never been let down by them in terms of their increases. Now, I would point out, for instance, that this budget, which I think is very responsible, is an increase of about 1%. Well, we wouldn't be able to do that if this tax cap were in place, and I think it leads to some substantial havoc. Last comment would be that having been involved as a legislator for 14 years and now as a county commissioner and trying to prepare a budget for the county, which is substantially smaller than this one, I understand the difficulty, the detail, the deliberation, and the concern that goes into budget making. This is not the kind of thing that the voter can do without sitting on the kind of board that you are, engaged, doing their homework. And so I appreciate very much what you've done, and I think this is a very bad idea. If it could be amended, maybe 10% would be possibility, but I don't think that's necessary, and I know it can't be amended. But I also would point out that,
Mr. Reed, if I may, the percentage can be amended, the language cannot.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
Yeah. I think I've just been told that there is an amendment for that effect.
There will be, I understand.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
But before we get there, I have a couple of other requests for comments or questions, and I'd like to attend to those next. Shirley McLaughlin, did I get that right? Sorry, what? She's 11. Oh, 11. George Downing is on number 10.
George Downing, 24 Hamden Drive. I had a couple of questions on this. For the board, this year's tax impact is 3.85, 3.86%, something to that effect. What is the monetary effect if this was in place this year? Oh, sorry, for Tim rather than the board.
So it's about $1,050,000 if this would to pass with majority vote had it passed last year.
Of a majority.
Yeah, with a supermajority, yeah. But it would have had to have passed last year. This warrant article would affect next year's. But so we would have to come in. We had a budget that was $600,000 over the previous year's budget. We would have had to have been $400,000 less than that to meet this criteria.
So essentially no increase.
We'd had to cut
basically
by $400,000.
Right.
Yep.
And then a legal question, I think. Is there any limit to what the number can be changed to via amendment?
The number can be whatever is moved and whatever passes.
And does anybody know offhand what the highest tax impact we've ever had was? I happen to remember a 5.5, but and I know that that's a shot in the dark. No? Okay. And the other thing is I would like to second Mr. Weed. The board works very hard on these budgets, and this applies to Articles 10, 11, 12, and 13. I really don't think it's a good idea to limit the budget in this manner. There's plenty of opportunity to give feedback while the budget is being built. There's opportunity when the previous articles are discussed to amend it with full discussion of what the impact would be. These articles are somewhat irresponsible in that they do not address where this money is being cut from. They just unilaterally cut some money from the budget and say, okay, go fix it for us. So I would urge that people not support this type of amendment to the budgets proposed by the board. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a request from Mr. Parent to speak.
I move to amend Article 10 as submitted by petition so that the final phrase reads, quote, by more than 10%, end quote, rather than, quote, by more than 0.5%.
All right, so grab your purple sheets, please. The motion is to increase the percentage to 10% rather than 0.5 and has been moved and seconded. Now, the ballot piece that you're going to use is ballot question C.
Can we speak to that motion before the vote?
Oh, yeah, I'm just giving the instructions. Just
okay.
Bear with me 1 second. So when the time comes to vote, I'm going to recognize Mr. Freeman first. I understand he's one of the sponsors of this petition. And, but be sure you use ballot question C. If you favor the amendment, the word to circle is yes. If you don't favor the amendment, the word to circle is no. Mr. Freeman.
Yes, I'd just like to speak to this. Mr. Ted Parent, just to point something out here, we've been accused,
Please
Liberty
address
activists,
the meeting, sir, not
Liberty
Mr. Parent.
activists have been accused of trying to drag this meeting out, and we have not motioned to amend any of the previous articles. I wish that Ted Parent would respect the wishes of the voters, the at least 25 people who signed the petitions to get these on the ballot so we could actually find out what the people of Keene think instead of the people who are attending this meeting, which from what I understand actually work for the most part for the school board themselves.
I would point out to you that that's out of order. Number one, Mr. Parent does not work for the school district or the school board.
I'm talking about the general attendance of this particular meeting.
He is a
Can we
voter.
let the voters vote on this instead of just the people in here?
Sir, they're all voters in here, in case you haven't noticed.
I meant all of the voters in Keene who obviously can't make it into this room today. This is clearly targeting of the average people of Keene.
You're out of
for the
order.
benefit.
Cut him off, please. Are you Thomas Driscoll?
Thomas Driscoll, 323 Washington Street, Keene. And these types of motions were made, I believe, last year. And
they've been made many years. Yes.
No, the type of cutting out something like this on a petition article. And I think it's a very selfish and pushy motion. And I really hate it. I don't like a motion like this that makes this article meaningless. If you leave it at 0.5%, the people can make a decision, and most people would vote no. I mean, just like the majority in this meeting. But the people could decide. And there's at least one petition article that I think I would like to see on the ballot, and I hope that one will not be made meaningless. And so I'd like to see all of these articles appear as they are and let the people be there. The people, there are many people who can't be here this morning. Many people that are working, many people that are not comfortable in an arrangement like this. They really don't want to speak out. But they want to vote on it. They want a voice. And I think it's important for us not to take the pushy attitude of reducing these articles to nothing, but keeping them as they are, and if they're good enough, then vote in favor of them. So I would vote no on this amendment.
Mr. Panza.
Being chair of the Finance Committee, I can tell you how incredibly difficult it would be to have a 0.5% increase. Number one, you have a budget, and if you didn't change that budget at all, it kept it at 0%, you still have the contractual agreements, and adding the contractual agreements automatically brings it up to 0.5%. Of more than 0.5%. And then you have issues like we don't know what the state is going to give us. Is a thousand little issues that involve developing this budget. And I agree. I think that that 0.5% is absolutely outrageously ridiculous.
Mr. Tonkinson.
John Tonkinson, 18 Newberry Lane. I don't like the warrant article, and I also don't like the amendment. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not an English teacher. I should have paid more attention in English class. John, you tried to explain this to me at the public hearing. This language makes no sense to me because of the tense in which it's written. And maybe there's an English teacher that can help me out here, but it says a recommended budget that increases, that means actually does, the amount to be raised by local taxes. The warrant article for the main budget is presented as this would have an impact based on what we know today. It is almost never what actually happens. So I'm trying to figure out if this, let's say this passed, what would it even mean? Because the board presents a budget that is in numerical dollars, and then there's a projected impact on taxes. This is written as the actual impact on taxes, which is not known for many months. So I don't understand the petition. I will say I don't agree with the amendment to the petition because I do think it makes what people have rightly submitted irrelevant. But on the other hand, I think the way it's written would be hard to follow, if not impossible.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes, I'll try to answer. First, I don't agree with either one of the regular petition and the new amendment to the petition. As someone who's been as finance chair twice and someone who's been on the finance organization at the city, what I think most people don't get, if they don't read, based on the taxes to be raised, local taxes. So, for example, if we sold a piece of property and got $2 million and we returned it back to the taxpayers, that means the amount of taxes to be raised next year would be $2 million less. And so the following year, when we go in, we can only raise whatever the taxes to be raised by 0.5%. So in effect, what it could do is it could cut the budget by almost $2 million because people look at the total budget. About 5 or 6 years ago, when the school got the $1 million+ for the stimulus, that reduced the amount of taxes to be reduced locally. So anytime we had a larger amount of revenue, unexpected revenue, for 1 year, reduces the taxes to be reduced, even though the budget went up, would have a tremendous negative effect going forward. It's not on the total budget, it's just on the local taxes to be raised.
I agree with you, Chris, that's the potential downfall. My argument is even more basic. The tenths, you're mixing two tenses in there. It doesn't make sense.
We at the State House don't write clear laws.
Mr. Parent, before I recognize you, I'd like to ask Mr. Wrigley for his opinion on Mr. Tonkinson's comments.
I can only agree that the statute as written is written poorly. I think it was an amateurish effort to establish a tax cap, and they did a lousy job of it. And unfortunately, there are numerous laws in this book where someone writes a rotten law and it passes and it gets put in this book. And I agree that the board passes a budget in January that only estimates its revenue sources, and then in June or July or even October, then we know our revenue source, and this law is a lawsuit waiting to happen. But it is the law. I'm interpreting as best as I can, and all I can tell you is you're right, John. It has tense problems, it has English problems, it has legal problems. But it is the law.
Mr. Parent.
This is an irresponsibly written law, and the only responsible thing for this body, which is the body that does have the authority to amend petition warrant articles, the only responsible position that we can take is to make it meaningless. And that's why I made the motion that I did, and I would urge people to vote for my amendment.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, I have a request for comment or question by Mr. Marazoff, if he's here.
As I understand it, the school population has been decreasing for many years, and every year the costs go up. And I want, whatever the system that you're using is not sustainable. And I would ask, as an alternative to this, what would you do you and the city both, but you were worse last year with your increases. Now, and the second question I would ask is, well, first of all, I'd like to point out that I went to Albany when this was happening in New York, and Governor Cuomo, we got a 2% cap, which is working quite well in New York State. So maybe the answer is someplace between 0.5 and 10%, but you really got to do something to constrain your increases. Now let me ask you one more question. If Mr. Parent's amendment doesn't pass, or does pass, what happens next? Can we now, if it does pass, can we come back and say, oh no, let's make it 2%? Or I mean, how many of these?
If it doesn't pass, it'll appear on the warrant article as presented today.
Okay, and so there's no chance to amend it again? I mean, his is the only amendment that can occur, or can someone else give?
After this meeting today, there'll be no chance to amend it.
Okay.
During this meeting, there'll be every chance to amend it.
So we could have this vote 10 times. He says 10%, it passes. Someone else says, oh, I want to amend it down to 3%.
That's the purpose of a motion to restrict reconsideration. It stays at that point.
I think anybody could make an motion during the discussion before there's been a motion to restrict.
Oh yeah, beforehand, you're correct.
Yes, so if he wanted to make a motion to make it 5% or 3%, he could do that. I mean, if he wanted to be ridiculous, we could have 20 motions for every 0.25% between 0 and 10.
That's the problem I'm trying to point out.
But why stop there?
That's the problem I'm trying to point out, exactly. With once you start this thing, and you know, it could just go on forever. We could continue to amend and amend and amend. But it's, but I really think you need something like this. If 0.5 is the wrong number, I mean, look at New York State. 2% is a very reasonable number. Completely different. Yeah. Why is New York
Please, no comments. If you want to be recognized, fine, but address your comments
you need to
the moderator
with
in the meeting.
continually decreasing populations and continually increasing costs and a tax base that's decreasing, you need to do something to constrain what you're doing, to contain costs. And this is a shot at it. Maybe 0.5 is the wrong number, but you need to do something close to 0.5, 2%, something like New York did.
I have no other written requests for questions with respect to number 10. Sue.
And this time I'll talk into the microphone. You know, I want to address two issues. One is the idea that we need to do something to reduce cost. I think as a school board we're doing a lot to reduce cost. We've closed an elementary school that is occurring between this year and next year and the following year. We have to invest that money in repairs to the infrastructure and to the buildings of the elementary schools, and that's what we're doing, which keeps us from having to raise, to do a warrant article and take on more debt. I think this board and the administrators and the educators have done a lot and are working very hard to right-size this school district in a period of declining enrollment and declining state funding. But I reject the idea that that has to be done by putting a cap. You elect us. You ask us to do this. You can unelect us if you don't like the way that this is going. I also reject the idea that this is not representative because people can't come. There's people that really believe in increasing, and continuing to fund education, and they can't come either. Right? That excuse, that reason is being put out there every year when people that want to reduce the board's autonomy and ability to put a budget together that makes sense, every year people say, this isn't representative. This is the process that we use in this area to decide how we fund schools. You ask us to do it, we do it. We have incredible numbers of forms where people can influence what we're doing. I very much appreciate the support of people that recognize that we're doing it. We're doing it. It's not easy work. We are always making choices between things that would be very good to have and things that are important to have. Putting a cap on it says you don't want us to do our job anymore. And it says that we are not working to balance the needs of the taxpayer with the needs of the education system, which I think is inaccurate and doesn't represent what this board is doing. Thanks.
Mr. Roberts.
I'll put my other hat on and go for clarification. I was on the municipality and county government committee up in Concord for a number of years, and we've talked about tax caps over and over. I forgot to say, the intent of this was based on the final figure that was given by DRA when they set the tax bill. So, for example, in December, they came and say the amount of taxes to be raised locally from Keene would be $27 million. That tax cap would be relating to that number. And so, yes, the language is really messed up. We could have done it much clearer, but we're not allowed to speak in English when we make laws.
Sir, name and address, please.
My name is David Crawford. I live at 36 Marlborough Street in Keene.
Thank you.
I'm hoping people will vote against this amendment. As the gentleman said, the people could have it on the a vote on it, and I say put it to the people to vote on it. Let them use their own judgment. This room has a lot of school workers, and so I just think it should go to the people, and I hope people vote in that regard. Thank you.
Mr. Parent, do you want to be recognized?
We are the people. We are the people that chose to follow the process and come here today. Every citizen has a right to be here.
Are there any other questions, comment? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Lucy Truslow, 21 Colby Street. I just wonder whether this will be public, the information that's about all of these discussions, so that people who aren't here can vote but have an informed...
Do you see these cameras all around?
Yes.
This is live.
I know. But that doesn't... I don't have TV. I can't see it on closed circuit TV. I'm wondering if this kind of information is put out there in some other way, so that in the Sentinel or whatever, so that people understand if they do vote for this article, that they know the impact of it.
I'm not sure I can answer that question. I don't know what gets out. I know there's a Sentinel reporter here somewhere. It's on live Cheshire TV. And does the board member want to try to tackle that question? Mr. Coates?
So it will be posted on our website. It will be, if you didn't, the minutes will be posted on our website so the community can go to the Keene School District and look up the meeting.
Yeah, okay. I'm just
I don't know, you've got the Sentinel here, I see the reporter up in the upper section. You've got Cheshire TV here. You got me talking about it on the radio. You've got, we'll do what we can as best we can, and we do that every single year.
The only thing we don't have is David Letterman making jokes about it, so. Oh, that him too. Susan.
The other thing I would say is that, and I put this out as often as I can, and I think all of my fellow board members would agree with this. Call us. If you have questions, call us about specific parts of this, call us about why we support it, call our administration. Ask what and ask your friends to do that, and ask people. I've been told there was a time when this room would have been full. Yeah. I am frustrated that it's not.
I am too, and that's one of my concerns.
Right.
That those of us who can be here and care are here, whether it's one side of the opinion or the other. But I don't trust that those who aren't here are going to be informed.
Well, and so what we can do about that is take that conversation to them. We all have friends that aren't here that we really wish were. So talk to them.
Okay, thank you.
Social media.
Mr. Freeman.
Social media.
Please restrict your comments to Article 10.
Yes, I'd like to ask Ted to remove his amendment or his proposed amendment, please, so we can finish this meeting and not have continued amendments and let the voters vote on this.
You're asking him to do one thing with respect to Article 10. We still have 3 other articles, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'd like to ask him to remove his proposed amendment from this article and further not amend any of the other ones so we can just get out of here.
I decline, and I intend to move to amend all of the others as well.
Well, I will move to amend them as well then.
Ms., I can't see it that well.
Ann Zott, 211 Chapman
okay,
Road.
that's what I thought.
I was just informed there are 23,000 voters in Keene, and we are the ones that bothered to show up today. So I think our voice should be heard. I just want to say, regarding New York, let's just remember they have a 10% income tax too, so they can afford a 2% increase every year. And I think it's really important that the school, having been on the school board, this is a frustrating thing to me. The school board budget always gets beat up because everybody gets to vote on it. Nobody gets to vote on the Chester County budget. Nobody gets to vote on the city budget. We get to vote on the school board budget. We just vote for the like Mr. Weed is the new county supervisor. He gets elected, he gets to do his budget, and he gets to submit it, and we get to just, deal with it when the tax bill comes. But everybody gets to come here and vote and beat up the school board budget. Our kids are in schools that the heat doesn't work, but we have a beautiful prison. We need to remember these things. And it frustrates me. So if you just imagine what would happen if we didn't close Jonathan Daniels, what the budget would be now. We just saved $600,000 by partially closing that school. Just imagine if that wasn't happening. I think these guys do a great job. Like Sue said, they're elected to do this. If you don't like what's going on, run for school board. But I do not support this. I don't even support a 10% increase. I think that's irresponsible as well. But it just goes to show you what you have to do to counter this ridiculous movement of trying to eliminate a funding for education. You're in the wrong place. You should be up at the State Department and asking them to stop giving money for, New Hampshire prisons, because they're going to redo the Concord Women's Prison, and maybe give some of that money to our kids' schooling.
I'm going to call the question. The question before the meeting at present is Mr. Parent's motion, seconded already, to amend Article 10 to increase the 0.5% figure to 10%. And if you want to vote yes, if you agree with this amendment, vote yes on ballot question C, as in Charlie. If you want to vote no, you circle no and put it in one of those blue boxes, or not blue boxes, back boxes. Let the voting begin, please. I'd like to call the meeting back to order, please. Everybody would take their seats for a moment. On the motion to amend Article 10, there were 80 votes in favor and 19 against, therefore the motion carries. So, and I have a request from Mr. Freeman with respect to Article 10, and I would recognize him right now.
Yes, is it Joe?
It's Mr. Hoppick.
I would like to defer my request until after James Cleveland's, please. I think he just put one in.
I was just handed that. Mr. Cleveland, you want to just yield your time to him?
I'll come up after him, please.
All right, that's fine. Where's Mr. Cleveland? Oh, go ahead.
James Cleveland, 31 Dunbar Street. I think it was Mr. Roberts earlier. I think it was the example, like if a boiler went out, there could be an emergency increase. How does that work? Could that be explained real quick?
I don't know where Mr. Roberts is.
So I think my understanding is like some emergency occurs and then it goes to the voters. Is that correct?
No. I'm going to recognize Mr. Coates to explain.
Oh, thank you.
I think I understand what you're saying, but once a budget's in place, and if there's a situation that occurs, if it's within the maintenance realm of the fund that we can utilize it for, we can utilize those monies for that. Otherwise, we have to find the monies within the budget that year. Correct me if I'm wrong, Wayne. We don't, there's no, if we do use that capital reserve fund for whatever the crisis, a boil or blows, we would have to have a public hearing first to tell them that's what we were doing.
What if it was not something maintenance related? What if it was some extraordinary event or something?
We would have to find that within the budget that's voted on.
Okay. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, I guess, the 10%. People plan their lives, like when people are buying a house or, they factor in the taxes, they plan their lives based on that. So if you went, let's say it was, 9.5% increase. There's a lot of people on fixed income, Social Security. That's a pretty big whack for them. So, I don't think 10% is the right answer. Even if it's, let's say, I think it was like between 0.5% and 10%. Let's say that there was a need to, let's say it was a cap at 5% and there's a need to go to 6%. There's no way that they could do that if this was passed. Is that correct?
That's what I understand. Mr. Coates? Mr. Murdo?
Yeah, I actually have the law book here, and I don't mean to jump in front of John here, but what this tax cap law requires is the budget that's presented by the school board could be no more than the amount, the limit in the cap. At this meeting, year to year, the voters can still amend that budget up or down, just like we're doing today. So this only binds the school board to the budget that it's proposing. And back to your other question on emergencies, and I believe what Mr. Roberts was referring to was calling an emergency meeting of the district,
okay.
Which If we had a situation, we had some unexpected costs and we just could not find the money in the existing budget, or really for other reasons, we could call an emergency meeting, an emergency vote, if you will, but the threshold to do that is very, very high. It would not be valid unless 50% of the registered voters voted, or a court found that the situation was an actual emergency and granted a special meeting. So it's a very difficult thing to do.
Okay, so I guess I'd like to propose an amendment to the percent, I guess, to 5%. I think that that's pretty reasonable, considering that the one gentleman said the highest increase.
Mr. Cleveland, hold on one second. Are you making a motion to amend the percentage to 5%?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second? You want to speak to your motion?
Yes, I think that's pretty reasonable, considering one gentleman, and I think he admitted he wasn't sure, but the largest year-over-year increase was 5.5, according to him. So, I mean, unless something unforeseen or whatever occurred, I guess I'm more concerned about the unforeseen for the people. You know, they planned their lives on what their cost of living is going to, run them. I mean, there's a lot of people who they don't really have an income anymore, and maybe their only real expense is they own their property, and it's that property tax bill. You know, so it's like they don't really have the money. And I know Keene has a pretty large aging population, so I think it's not. I think 5% is a reasonable percent. I think it's like most people could probably stomach that; they could handle it. I mean, 10%, that would be a lot of money, I think, for most people. Thank you.
Susan.
Because the 10% is there doesn't on any level mean we intend to use the 10%. The 10% number, I believe anyway, that Mr. Parent put forward is to render irrelevant the idea of a cap and let the school board do their job. We don't come into the public with recommended increases of 10%. So before that matter, I'm not interested at all in the 5%. That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing is passing this year's budget. And we are nowhere near 10%. We're not near 5%. We don't need a very small minority of people in this community telling us that do not in any way represent in my mind, the will of the people, quote unquote, telling us how to do our job. We take our job very seriously. We come in with very responsible and much lower, caps than that.
Mr. Parent.
I would urge everyone to vote no on this. It's poorly worded. It doesn't make any sense. It only talks about local taxes and other sources of revenue. The 5%, what people are trying to do is to restrict increases in expenses, and this really doesn't attack that at all. It's just talking about local tax revenue, which is a very much of a moving target. That's why I made the 10%, and I would urge people to vote no to any amendment to make it any number less than that.
We're going to give it one more shot then. Are there any other questions, comments about the motion on the floor? If you've already spoken, let's have somebody else have a chance. I know Mr. Freeman wanted to speak. Is he going to speak now or not? Oh.
Amy LaPierre, 61 Wilder Street.
Okay.
This is point of order. Can we do a voice vote on this,
No.
or do we have to do ballot?
We have to do a ballot.
Okay, thanks.
They've requested it. Mr. Tonkinson.
John Tonkinson, 18 Newberry Lane. I'd like to ask the petitioner to withdraw his amendment. We're not voting on this article anyway right now. We're voting on an amendment to the article. It still has to get 3/5 majority. It's unlikely that the article as it was originally submitted would pass 3/5 majority, and it's really unlikely that Ted's change will get 3/5 majority. It's a moot point. We could sit here and argue all day about it. As Susan said, the board is not going to, even if it did pass the 3/5 majority, the board's not going to submit an article budget that's 10% more. So in the interest of expediency, I'd ask the petitioner to withdraw his amendment.
Mr. Cleveland, do you want to withdraw your amendment, your motion?
No, I'd like to, I guess, keep it on there.
Then we're going to call the vote. Thank you. What we're going to do is use question D, the ballot, purple question D, to mark your vote. A yes is a vote for the motion to amend to 5%. A no is a rejection of that motion. Thank you.
So we're rejecting.
If I may have your attention, please. Call the meeting back to order. The votes have been counted. And the motion was to amend Article 10 again to 0.5%. 5%, sorry, you're right, 5%. And that motion had 80 noes and 14 yeses. So that motion fails. And the article remains as initially amended at 10%. Any other comments with respect to Article 10? Mr. Freeman.
Actually, can I ask a question in relation to this?
As long as it's in relation to Article 10, sure.
I guess, well, I'll ask the question, then you can decide. Isn't it true that the student population in Keene has declined over the last several years, every year?
I can't answer that personally. A board member could.
I'm seeing Chris nod. Chris is nodding there. Looks like that's the case.
Mr. Coates.
Yes, over the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years, we've seen a gradual downward spiral. I think we're seeing at the high school level, I think we're going to see it level off and then slowly increase somewhat, but it will never be at the levels it was in the past. And yeah.
Well, there are surely people in Keene that want to see the budget for the schools with the shrinking population, for the budget to also shrink. And I would like. Well, that's the reason why I'm going to propose.
Hold on a second, Mr. Freeman. Just hold on. It has to do with the, I guess, the cost percentages of the cap with respect to Article 10. So I'm going to allow it.
Well, I was just prefacing my proposed amendment to Article 10, which is to amend the percentage to negative 0.5%.
Okay, I'm going to rule that out of order.
All right.
Wait a minute. We've had 2 votes, one at 10% and one at 5. The 5 was defeated and the 10 was passed. So the will of the voters in this meeting, in my opinion, is clear and that the budget cap should be 10%.
I'd like to challenge the chair on that ruling.
Well, fine. We'll challenge the chair. We have a challenge to my ruling. Now I lost my, We're on letter E. If you agree with the decision of the chair to end amendments to Article 10, vote yes on ballot E. If you would disagree with my decision, circle no. What did I do? Yes. What is it, E? You need your ballot slip E, okay? The motion on the floor, which has not been seconded. Is there a second to Mr. Freeman's motion? All right. The motion on the floor is that I have overruled his request to amend the Article 10 to negative 0.5, or I think 5%. Negative 0.5. And I've ruled that motion out of order, and it's not going to be addressed. If you agree with my decision, vote yes. If you disagree with my decision, vote no on E. Thank you. If I may call the meeting back to order, please. The motion on the table was to overrule my decision that Mr. Freeman's motion to further amend Article 10 was out of order, and that decision was affirmed by a vote of 84 yes and 8 no. So we will move on to Article 11. Is there a second? All those in favor to restrict reconsideration on Article 10, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Article 11 is submitted by petition, and it reads as follows. Shall the district reduce the total average operating expense per pupil by $500 per year for the next 5 years, or until the average operating expense per pupil reaches the state average? This budget reduction will take effect on the 2015-16 budget, and if passed, will result in immediate reduction in expenses, with the surplus being returned to the district. Any discussion? Mr. Freeman.
Yeah, Ian Freeman, 63 Emerald Street. I'd like to motion that no lawyers be allowed to make further motions today.
That is out of order if the lawyer is a voter. I'm not even going to entertain that. Any other comments? You don't have to comment to that, Mr. Parent, but go ahead.
I have an amendment when you're ready to hear it.
The floor is yours.
I move to move that Article 11, submitted by petition, be amended so that it reads as follows. Shall the district establish a committee to see if the district should reduce the total average of operating expenses per pupil by $500 by year for the next 5 years, or until the average operating expense per pupil reaches the state average. This budget reduction would take effect on the 2015-16 budget, and if passed, will result in immediate reduction in expenses, with the surplus being returned to the district. The committee shall consist of 3 persons named by the chair of the board of the Keene School District and shall report its findings to the board by July 1st, 2015. And I'd like to speak to that if it's seconded.
Is there a second? Second. Please speak to it.
This is a very, very difficult concept. First of all, if you think about the math, if every town pays this, then there's a constant downward trend to all school budgets, because the higher ones will always be lower. Second of all, the concept of the average expense per pupil is very slippery. Back in my days on the board, we did some looking into this to find out where Keene stood with respect to average expenses, and we found out how difficult it can be to come up with a number. For example, Manchester. Manchester has all of the athletic budgets under the city rather than under the school budget. They don't show up in the school budget. It's either Dover or Rochester, I forget which, has all of the operating expenses for the buildings under the city and not under the school budget. And so the concept of what the average expense is for pupil is very slippery. And if this is going to be entertained at all, there should be a committee to look into this because of the complications. I would urge people to vote for my amendment so that this can be looked into to see if it's reasonable. I think it's a bad concept in general for the reasons that I talked about, the mathematical problem, but I would urge people to support this.
Thank you, Mr. Parent. Any other comments? Yes. Just name and address, please.
George Downing, 24 Hamden Drive. I'm not sure if this is a financial or a legal question, but this has to do with the wording of the original proposal, the original article. Is it actually applicable? Can we pass as voters the budget in Article 1 and then pass Article 11 that goes back and amends the budget that we just passed on Article 1?
John.
I am certain the Department of Revenue Administration would say that Article 1 takes precedence over Article 11 if they both passed, if that answers your question.
It does, thank you. And that being the case, I would also urge that people support Ted's amendment, and I would further like to suggest that the petitioners please research the laws when they're writing their petition articles.
Does anybody else have any comments, questions? Mr. Tonkinson.
I'd ask Ted to withdraw his amendment, and the reason for that is both the submitted article and his amendment are completely mathematically incorrect. We are included in the state average. You cannot therefore compare us to the state average without removing us from the state average. And since we cannot rewrite the article as written to add that, at least that's my understanding, then it doesn't matter if this article passes. And it doesn't matter if Ted's article passes because they're written mathematically incorrect.
We can amend the language on Article 11, and we can amend it as long as we don't eliminate the subject matter.
Well, then it needs to say compared to the state average that is calculated without Keene included. Otherwise, you can't do that statistically.
Okay, but the motion on the floor is Mr. Parent's motion, made and seconded to establish a committee. Is there any comments about that motion to amend? Ms. Zott, I think I saw your hand first.
Ann Zott, 211 Chapman Road. If you can just I just don't understand your amendment. So you're going to have a committee to do what?
To look into the mathematical points, to look into Mr. Tonkinson's points, to look into whether the concept is a state average is reasonable. Frankly, if the voters turn this down, I wouldn't be disappointed at the polls. But this would assure that no matter what the voters do at the polls, it won't have any effect this year. And that some of the issues that I raised could certainly be looked into. I don't think this would be a burdensome thing. I think the chair could appoint 3 reasonable people that would be able to do it. And I would urge you to vote yes for it. I think it would be the simplest way to deal with this issue.
Yes. Name and address, please.
Bill Hay, 33 Pine Avenue, and I'm not an attorney. As I heard the amendment, it sounded like the first sentence wants to establish a committee, then the second sentence is pretty much what's there, which assumes that a budget reduction has taken place. So I don't think that works grammatically, but
Actually,
I don't think you can also, well, at any rate.
just as a point of order, I just said to see if the district should reduce the total average. So I think the grammar's right.
I didn't catch that. The other thing is, I don't want to hamstring the board's ability to do things. So whether or not Article 10 or 11 are amended to make different percentages and start shaving things down and nitpicking and wasting our time, I think we should all come out and march and vote against them.
Mr. Coates.
Why don't you go first? I'm waiting for some numbers.
I would like people to recognize that our costs with Keene in the state average, in the middle school and the high school are almost exactly at state average. They're very, very close. We have known for years that our elementary costs are higher, and we use that information to look hard at the question of, do we need 5 schools? And that was part of our decision to get to 4 schools. By no means all, but it was something that we actively looked at and said we have to address this. So the board is working with information like state averages and saying, how can we best address this? The other thing is, I don't think the voters of this town are happy with average. I think we want our schools to be great.
I'll wing it. I was going to say some of what Susan you were going to say, and I think this is our job. We are within, like you said, we're within probably about $200 of the state average at the high school. We're same with about the middle school. Probably actually we're to about $200 underneath the state average, and at the elementary school we're about $3,000 over, and that's why we've been doing the readjustment of, the restructuring of the elementary. We have worked towards addressing that matter. I don't think a panel of 3 is we're already doing the work, and that's why you voted us in the first place. And so I can't, Ted, sorry, I'm not going to support this one, and I think this is advisory anyways, if I understand right. If it was to pass, it's advisory for us to look at and decide if we wanted to do something or not.
Well, I'm very concerned about that. I understand your point. I would frankly vote against even as it amended if it went to the polls. But this is talking about something for the next 5 years. And that's why I think it's really important to study and look at the consequences of this. I don't want to get into a legal fight. I don't want to end up with having an argument about this is advisory, but it goes for 5 years. I think it's much safer to have a committee take a look at it and look at all of these things to make sure that we're not screwing ourselves up.
Okay. Tom Driscoll, 323 Washington Street. Since Mr. Parent's amendment addresses the subject matter quite clearly, and maybe even a little bit better than the actual article, is it possible for those who asked for the written ballot to rescind that, take that back, and let us take a voice vote?
You'd have to ask the signatories on the request received earlier, which I don't have in front of me, but it's here. I actually have 6 signatures. James Cleveland, Derek Horton, Stephen Daves, Shauna Nash, Conan Salata, and Ian Freeman would have to all withdraw, or at least 2 of them would. I don't hear them jump into the 4, so we're going to just have it by a ballot vote, as they requested. So, sir.
Gerald Kuhn, 145 Eastern Avenue. I don't necessarily support what Mr. Parent is proposing, but I definitely do not support this idea. I work in a district where this idea passed, and even though it's advisory, it's amazing how strong that advisory becomes, and it's amazing what kind of damage this kind of an article can do within a school building. I would, in that regard, I thank Mr. Parent for coming up and doing something to change this article, because this article is dangerous. It's written in such a way where it's very easy for people to come up and say, oh, I want to vote to reduce my taxes. Boom, it's done, without really thinking about what's the damage that is going to be done. And as has been mentioned before, that's the reason why we elect a school board, is for them to look into the details. It's like trying to weed your garden with a hand grenade. It does too much damage.
I always thought that worked. Are there any other comments, questions, or remarks to be made about the amendment to Article 11? Can you reread it? I'll do my best. The Article 11, as amended, it would read that, shall the district establish a committee to see if the district should reduce the total average operating expenses per pupil by $500 per year for the next 5 years, or until the average operating expense per pupil reaches the state average. This budget reduction would take effect in the 2015-16 budget, and if passed, will result in immediate reduction in expenses, with the surplus being returned to the district. The committee shall consist of 3 persons named by the chair of the board of the Keene School District, and shall report its findings to the board by July 1st of 2015. That is the amendment. Ann.
Ann Zott, 211 Chapman. Would Mr. Parent agree to add to that amendment, this is strictly an advisory committee?
It is by definition, I think.
I think that would be meaningless to add it. They're reporting to the board. That's all they're doing.
But if this is voted on and it says that you're not, if this were to pass, this is not then saying that the will of the people was that there should be a $500 per pupil decrease for the next 5 years.
No, that is not the intent of the motion.
Okay.
And I don't think that's a fair reading of the amendment either. Seeing no other comments, we turn it once again to the purple sheet. We are near ballot question F. If you are in favor of Mr. Parent's amendment, circle yes. If you are not, circle no, and everybody knows where the boxes are. If I may have your attention, we can return to the meeting. We have the vote in on the Article 11 in motion. The motion to amend Article 11 passes by a vote of 75 yeses to 16 noes. So we'll turn to Article 12. Motion made and seconded to restrict reconsideration of Article 11.
Can we have further motions on Article 11 before that motion, please?
No, the motion's been made. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Article 12 is also submitted by petition, and it reads as follows. Shall the district make a 5% reduction to the executive administration section of the operating budget? If passed, this reduction will take effect on the 2015-16 budget and will result in immediate reduction in expenses, with the surplus being returned to the district. Any comments? Questions? Mr. Parent.
I move that Article 12, submitted by petition, be amended so that it reads as follows. Shall the district establish a committee to see if the district should make a 5% reduction to the executive administration section of the operating budget? If passed, this reduction will take effect on the 2015-2016 budget and will result in the immediate reduction in expenses, with the surplus being returned to the district. The committee shall consist of 3 persons named by the chair of the board of the Keene School District and shall report its findings to the board by July 1st, 2015. And if it's seconded, I'd like to speak briefly to it.
Sure. Anybody want to second that motion?
Second.
5%.
The board says 0.5. We need to clarify. I said 5 because that's what I had understood, and that's what you had said.
Well, regardless of what's on the screen, the motion to amend is 5%. So that's what I heard.
Well, I just want to make sure I'm amending the appropriate original article. Is the sheet wrong? The original was 5%. The original was 5%, not 0.5. So that, I just was point of order. What's on the board, Article 12, is incorrect. It should
All right.
be 5%.
We all understand that the original motion was 5%.
All right.
All right. So you want to speak to your motion?
Yes, very briefly. I'm not sure what the executive administration section is. I don't know how it would impact the district. This is another weeding your lawn with a hand grenade. I like that one. And I think that somebody should be looking into that before it gets any further at all. So I think the chairman of the board could establish a committee to look into it and report back to the board to see if it's a wise idea to look into any further.
Any other comments, questions? Susan.
So I suspect, but God knows I'm not sure, that the intent here is to cut the staff at the SAU. So I just want to go on record at saying these are some of the smartest, most hardworking people I have ever worked with. And I am thrilled that they're here, and I wouldn't want to cut a dime out of the work that they do.
Ed.
We seem to go through this every year. The budget was Article 1. The time to make adjustments to the budget was when we were considering Article 1, and no one came forward and said, I recommend reducing the budget by any amount. Going back to an earlier question about the relevance of this whole article, in a Senate Bill 2 official ballot district such as we are, you either get the budget or the default budget. Those are the choices, and submitting other articles to address the budget are just wrong, and I guess I know I intend to ask legislators to fix that in the law, but we have to we have to allow petition articles if they're properly submitted regardless of what they say, but I'm not sure I'm even in favor of amending this because I believe that this article is meaningless once Article 1 has been voted on.
Mr. Tonkinson.
Before I can make my mind up on Mr. Parent's amendment, because his amendment might very well be redundant. I'm assuming that the people who wrote this petition have done their research, have attended board meetings, have attended finance committee meetings, and so I would be helpful for me, and I'm assuming the rest of the House, if the moderator could ask the petitioners, if they are present, to enlighten us on how many board meetings they've attended, how many finance committee meetings they've attended, how well they know what makes up the administration. There might very well be merit here. I certainly think that it might be worth taking a look at, but I'm assuming they've already done that. So could the moderator please help? It would be good before we vote on Mr. Parent's amendment if we had some education, if you could ask the petitioners to tell us how many meetings of the finance committee and of the full board they've been to over the last fiscal year.
Well, how about if I let them speak to their petition if they want? Are there any petitioners here present for Article 12? Do I see any hands? None? I can't see that well, so Mr. Salata, okay.
Conan Solity, 132 Kennedy.
Thank you.
I work nights. I cannot make any of these meetings. I would if I could. These three petitions, these first three ones, were meant as tools. I was told, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, that as far as the budget was concerned, that making adjustments to the budget, we can't pick and choose line items.
I believe that to be correct, yes.
So I can't say during Article 1, hey, let's make a cut to just the executive branch of the budget. So, and that's the reasoning behind this particular warrant article.
Maybe you can explain what the executive administration is.
Okay, if you look at the Keene school budget, you have instruction, support services, general administration, and then executive administration, as well as non-instructional services and others, like building funds and all. So the executive administration is broken down as SAU management services, all other administration, school administration services, business, operating and maintenance of plant, student transportation, support services, central and other. It makes up about $13 million of the $63.5 million budget.
You realize this is not the SAU budget we're debating. This
is the Keene budget.
Okay. It's Keene's contribution to that budget.
Correct. It's the $63 million budget that Keene is using. It's right off their website.
Point of order.
Point of order, Mr. Parent.
It seems to me, isn't I asked Mr. Wrigley, but the SAU budget is set by the SAU, and Keene would not have the authority to reduce that anyway. That's one of the reasons I want to look into this.
That's correct.
Mr. Salata, you want to speak to your petition in further detail?
I would just like to add, I've been up since 9 o'clock last night. I do work. I can't make these meetings. Everyone's complaining about us wasting the people's time, but I see it. I see it as this whole system is wasting my time. My daughter doesn't attend this school. If I had more kids of age, I wouldn't send them to this school. There are other options out there: private schools, charter schools, home schools, unschooling, and yet the system doesn't take us into account. So I'm screwed.
I would ask that you
I'm screwed regardless.
Confine your comments to the motion on Article 12, please. Mr. Panza.
You have a whole crew of people in your little community that could attend a meeting. To the best of my knowledge, and I've attended every meeting in 6 years, I've only seen one attendance about 3 years ago in the Finance Committee. No attendance in education, no attendance in policy, no attendance anywhere. Now, maybe you work nights, but I'm sure there's other people out there, including Salata and Freeman or whatever their names are, that could have made them, at least once. Not once. You don't even know what you're talking about. As a matter of fact, you don't even know what an executive administration cost
Point
is.
of order. Ask the moderator to not allow personal attacks.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Mr. Panza, don't personally attack Mr. Salata.
Like I said, my daughter doesn't attend this school. Why would I have anything
And
to
I
do
would
with
ask you,
this?
sir, to restrict your comments to the motion on the floor.
That's why I don't come to these meetings.
Thomas Driscoll, 323 Washington Street. I wanted to know if it can be changed. Actually, executive administration section might include a lot of salaries that are already negotiated in another way and can't be altered. Is there anything in there that actually can be altered, and how much?
I would point out that this is not a petition submitted by the board. I'm not sure if they'll know the answer to that. But I'll throw it out to any member of the board who wants to tackle it. Go ahead.
No.
It's my line.
And I do want to say that you know, Carl, you said they didn't, but Joe, you've attended. So Joe has attended. You know.
I saw Mr. Murdo's hand first this time.
Yeah, I just want to talk about what exactly a budget is and what happens afterwards. And I forget who made the comment about whether or not it matters if you change line items within the budget. The budget is a planning document and it's a tool. We're talking about, in some cases, expenses that are not going to occur until 15 months from now, 16 months from now. Really, the budget becomes a guideline for the administration and for the board to operate. Once we get going, we do have the authority to transfer funds within the various accounts within the district as things happen during the year that cause us to do that. So, again, writing an article like this really does nothing because whatever that executive administration section is, when the time comes, as As was said, we have to pay people whatever we have to pay them. We have to pay the electric bill that we get from the electric company, and all the other things that we do. And if we don't have enough money in one account to meet an expense in that account, then we have to move it around. We have to make choices. So I think this whole, the point of doing this is kind of a moot point. It's not the right way to accomplish what I believe the petitioners are trying to accomplish. So I don't even know that it makes there's any point in amending it, because I think the article is meaningless as written.
Susan.
I think it probably is meaningless, but until you get up to Concord and get them to change the law, I'm going to support the amendment just so that there's not any blowback here.
Yes.
Misty Martinez Bohannon, 74 Dale Drive. Speaking as a public member of somebody who does come to, I would say probably 90% of the committee meetings and the school board meetings, I have taken a lot of time away from my family to be informed. And if you want to know about what is happening, you need to come to the meetings or look at it online. Everything's online, or you can request it from Cheshire TV. This is important information, and you can't go about the way that you're going about it without being informed in the vote. Also, if you really want to know, if you really wanted to, as far as this article, you needed to go to the SAU board meeting.
Are there any further comments on the motion to amend? Mr. Freeman.
Yes, I'd just like to further comment regarding what Carl Panza said. I've been to several of the school board meetings in the past, and I noticed that a lot of people don't attend, period. I mean, many of them are almost completely empty as far as the audience. And that's also very similar to this meeting. It's very, very low attendance. And I think that's because people don't really believe they can have an effect on your meetings or this system. And clearly, when people actually do organize, because at least 25 people signed these petitions to get them on the ballot, when they actually do organize, they're undercut by Ted Parent here. And, we don't actually get to find out what the people think. So I think that's unfortunate. I have a question, actually. I'm wondering how many people in this room do not work for the school district or have a family member who works for the school
Freeman,
district?
That's out of
order. How
order.
many people?
That's out of order.
Thank you.
I'm going to call the motion. All those in favor of the motion to amend Article 11 should vote yes on ballot question G. Those not in favor of it, circle no, and you know where the boxes are. If I may have your attention, please, we'll call the meeting back to order. The motion to amend Article 12 passes by a vote of 72 yes to 19 no, so the motion carries. And we'll move on to Mr. Parent. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The motion to restrict reconsideration of 12 carries. Mr. Freeman.
I don't really think it's fair, point of order, to allow him to motion to restrict until all the further amendments have been proposed to these items.
That's the procedural rule. It's perfectly allowable.
So if he's standing at a microphone and I'm standing at a microphone, you just get to pick him every time.
No, I saw him first. That is what we're following. He moved to restrict in time. And if you want to comment on number 12, or I'm sorry, number 13, we'll go from there. And I'll read Article 13 now. Get the right one in front of me. Article 13 is submitted by petition. Shall the Keene School District be prohibited from electioneering, which includes but is not limited to spending budget money to parentheses, directly or indirectly, close parentheses, educate, advertise, and or influence the voting results on questions, warrant articles, ballot initiatives, and or candidates. That is Article 13. Mr. Parent.
I move that Article 13, submitted by petition, be replaced with the following: shall the right of the Keene School District to, quote, electioneer, end quote, as that term may be reasonably defined, be in accordance with applicable state law. And then after a second, I'd like to speak to it briefly.
Go ahead.
It's the most absurd petition article that I've seen in a long time. This board has had a policy for many years of trying to educate the public as to what the issues are. We've had some comments today about are we going to be telling things? And what the heck is electioneering anyway? And how do you get by the Julius Caesar problem, which is that you educate but you're slanting it in one way or another, like in the Friends, Romans, and Countrymen speech. This is an absolute absurd trap. And I know Mr. Freeman doesn't seem to like lawyers, but boy, this is a gift to every lawyer. Boy, it'd give us employment for years. So I would urge you to support this amendment, and because this is just silly.
Could you please reread the warrant, the amendment?
Shall the right of the Keene School District to electioneer, with quotes around that, as that term may be reasonably defined, be in accordance with applicable state law?
Does somebody else have a question or comment over there?
I also want to point out this has real First Amendment problems too. It's free speech issues.
Carnegie Solidarity 132 Kennedy. I don't have the actual state law in front of me that talks about electioneering, but it is illegal. You mean by it. It is illegal to use public property to influence the vote. So, if, say, for example, someone at SAU 29 used the telephone to call up a communication agency to print out some signs, or they got in their vehicle during work hours and went and delivered those signs, or spent taxpayers' money to influence the vote, it's illegal. And they shouldn't be able to do that.
Are public service announcements also illegal? I'm confused.
If they want to get on WKBK in the morning and they want to talk about the articles, or they want to get on someone's program or at the school board, that's their opportunity to enlighten the community through Cheshire TV and whatnot. But to actually use taxpayers' money to influence the vote is illegal, but it's not. The actual wording of money isn't in the statute. So this article will help clarify that better. Here's my example from last year, Article 1. The school board set aside $30,000. They ended up spending $24,000 to put ads in the Sentinel, put ads in the Shopper, put ads on WKBK, bunch of aired ads, and a bunch of signs all over town. Except I had 7 warrant articles. Are you saying that the school board would set aside some money for me to print out some signs? Or how about my 4 this afternoon? I would have to spend my own money in order to influence the voters, and it's a very unfair advantage that the school can set aside money like that and use it on their own ballots. I think it's very unfair. I think it's unethical, and it is against the law, and it should be. This should be prevented from ever happening again.
Can you cite the law to which you refer?
I'll find it for you.
Thank you. Any other?
Suzanne Charles, 22 Evergreen Avenue. I'm very much in favor of Mr. Parent's amendment to the article. I think every school we have in our district and our city has a mission statement which states that we want our students to be contributing members to their community and society. And this could be interpreted as anything we do to tell the public or connect our kids with the public in publicity and tell about what we're doing in the classroom, out of the classroom, what they've accomplished could be seen as an attempt to get people to be in favor of our school board and our school budget and what we do. We need to celebrate what is happening in our classrooms. We need to support our students and our staff in what they're doing. And if we can't tell our community about it or show it in some way, that's nearly impossible.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
I have that law, by the way.
Thomas Driscoll, 323 Washington Street. In spite of the opening comments, I am very much in favor of this article. This is one of the reasons I'm here. I like the idea very much. One of the things that aggravates me more than anything else is to be against the project that the school is proposing, and then to go around to the city and to see signs all over the place paid for by my tax money to advertise against the point that I'm in favor of. And I'm also very much in favor of limiting electioneering, which includes the school board recommends a yes vote upon this question. I hate it when I see that. campaigning is not allowed within 50 feet of the polls, and yet the school board is allowed to put that campaign message, that's electioneering, right on the warrant. Now you're going to say that the state law requires, or state rules require the school board to do that. But if this one state law says no campaigning, then that is more fair and more just, and that should preempt the other law. I would be very much in favor of this, and I'd leave it as it is. I'm wondering if Mr. Parent's amendment has changed the wording more than it's supposed to be changed, allowed to be changed.
You have information? Go ahead.
I did find the law, and by the way, the law you just spoke, the school board is allowed to write yes or no at the end of their money warrants. I found that one out last year. But this is a different one. This is 659:44-A, electioneering by public employees. No public employee as defined in RSA 273-A:1, 9, shall electioneer while in the performance of his or her official duties or use government property, including but not limited to telephones, fax machines, vehicles, and computers for electioneering. For the purposes of this section, electioneer means to act in any way specifically designed to influence the vote of a voter on any question or office. Any person who violates this section shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. Do you want me to say that? Did you get that statute?
I did. 659:44-A, right?
Correct.
Any other comments? Questions?
One.
Yes.
Oakle Johnson, 48 Baker Street. I'm having trouble remembering the wording of the amendment, but the question is, what would happen if that amendment were voted down in the election? What would the effect of
Then
that
Article
be?
13 would be as it appears now.
No. I mean the amendment. If the amendment passes and goes to the voters, and the voters vote it down, what would be the effect of voting down the amended article?
Well, it obviously wouldn't pass, and there would be no effect. It wouldn't be, the board or the district wouldn't be bound by it.
I would remind that I am not trying to change state law. I'm just saying that the Keene School District shall have the right as it's in accordance with applicable state law. I'm just this is so poorly worded. Educate, does that mean you can't publish the budget? I mean, it's just absurd. You can't advertise public meetings. You can't arrange for elections. I mean, this is just such an overreach of anything that could possibly be intended. That's why I said we should do whatever we do in accordance with state law, and I'd urge people to vote for my amendment.
I was ahead of that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you over there. Thank you.
Thank you. David Crawford, 36 Marlborough Street, Keene. I would be interested to hear the attorney. I'm not sure his name, but looks like he's looking at a legal book right now. John, Mr. I would be interested in his perspective of the law that Mr. Sade quoted, if he could.
I think the school board has an obligation to inform and to educate, and has further an obligation not to an electioneer, as that term was defined by Mr. Solida. I can't draw that line between informing and educating without specific facts. In 30 years I've been doing this, I've seen the board overextend itself more than once. And I sit there and look at something and I say, whoa, I hope no one asks me about that. But those are specific details that sometimes I trip across. I think on the whole, the board does it right. It has public hearings to inform and to educate. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think sometimes they overextend themselves, but I think it's all in good faith. I don't think we're not talking about Richard Daley in Chicago and that sort of thing.
Hi, Steve Maselli, 10 Aspen Street. I'm a little bit confused based on a comment just before me. So there's already a law that says electioneering is illegal, if I understand this correctly. Is that right? Is that what the law says, that you're not allowed to electioneer? And then that this article that is being proposed confirms that law, right? So if this article and not the amendment were to go to the polls and it did not pass, does that mean then that the school board would not have to follow anti-electioneering laws? I mean, the logic behind the original article confuses me. Could the petitioner try and straighten it?
If Article 13 fails, if there's no amendment and it fails, then the state law always controls, even if it passes.
So if this article is really, it has no effect on anything because there's already a law that says you're not allowed to electioneer.
It certainly doesn't supersede the law, the state law. Susan.
But this goes far beyond not being able to electioneer. This law says you can't educate.
It says you can't use money to educate.
Or use money to educate. And our charter, our responsibility includes a mandate to educate. So this, from my point of view, is deeply problematic. Ted's shift to doing it in accordance with law is, neutralizes it, but keeps us going to John and asking him to weigh in, when we're proposing, something that we think could possibly be on the edge of that. So I'm in favor of Mr. Perrin's amendment.
The reason I wrote it up the way that I did, the law states that government property can't be used, not specifically money from a budget. The only thing that's been really added to this equation is money from the budget being used to educate, advertise, and or influence. It doesn't say that you can't educate, advertise, or influence. It says you can't use money from the budget to do those things. And I think that's very fair.
Yeah, but it's not, because in order to use, that means if we put an ad in the paper saying we're having a meeting to educate, we're using money. If we print something out, we're using money. If we dare to offer coffee or water at the meeting, we're using money to educate. And that, again, that is our job to make decisions on. Yeah, Cheshire TV, we pay them to educate. This is part of our responsibility. It's a huge part of our responsibility, and if there's one thing people get really frustrated with us on is there's always this cry that we don't do enough of it.
Any other comments? Sir.
George Downing, 24 Hamden Drive. I would like to come out in favor of Mr. Parent's amendment. Among other things, Mr. Salata and Mr. Freeman have been coming up here and quoting to us from the online printouts of the budget. This would specifically prohibit putting any of the budget information online. It would prohibit putting any of the minutes to these meetings online, because those use the computers in the SAU office, which is school district property, in order to educate the public. I think that Sue Hayes is correct. One of the hardest things in this community right now is communication from the board to the public and from the public to the board. The board is already limited by state law against electioneering. Essentially, what the article as written does is prohibit the board from communicating information to the public, not electioneering, telling us what is going on, what the articles are, what the budget is, what the board is trying to do at any given time. It is an unnecessary limitation. It essentially cripples the communication between the board and the public when the board is already bound by state law to not electioneer in the first place. So I believe that Ted's amendment affirms that the board is bound by the state laws without limiting what the board can do to keep the public informed.
Yes.
James Cleveland, 31 Dunbar. I think it's important, you got to read the last part of the Article 13. This will only apply to questions, warrant articles, ballot initiatives, and or candidates. So it wouldn't prevent, let's say, putting the budget online. That doesn't really relate to the questions, warrant articles.
Sir, it says it's a prohibition against educating, advertising, and/or influencing the voting results on questions. What do you mean by questions?
Well, the voting results. So I think maybe it's not worded very well, but I think the intent of this article was to basically, it's one thing to say, you know, please come out and vote on Article 1. It's another thing to say vote yes or no on Article 1. There's a huge difference in that. And I think that's what the intent of this article is, trying to prevent that.
Should the school board tell us where we go to vote, or would that be prohibited?
I mean, I think that would not, that couldn't really influence the vote one way or another. You know what I mean? So if you just inform people like, here are the polling locations, that's completely different than saying, here are the polling locations, you should vote yes on Articles 1 through 13 and no on 14. It's completely different, you know what I mean? Thank you.
Anybody have anything new to add?
Yeah, I've got a question. Ian Freeman, 63 Emerald Street. You guys talked about the schools in Keene being great. If they are so great, why do you have to threaten to take people's homes if they don't want to pay for them?
Point of order. That's out of order. Does anybody else have anything meaningful to say at this point? I'm going to call the question. We're on ballot question H.
I was just on my way here for this.
Go ahead.
I
Last
was
comment.
just going to say, I think most people are plain and clear about what they're, if making a suggestion to vote a certain way, the difference between that and informing people, it's plain and clear. This fellow up front came here because of being, and he made it clear that, and I'm clear on it, and I think everybody that sees the ads is very clear on the difference between saying where to vote and how to vote.
Susan.
I think you're right about that distinction. The point is, right now, we have a legal obligation on those ballots to say what we support and what we don't support. So until that changes, that's what we're going to do.
All right, so the question is now called. You're going to be using ballot question H to vote on the motion to amend Article 13. We have the ballot votes ready for the amendment to Article 13. The motion to amend passes by a vote of 72 yeses to 11 noes, so the motion carries. Mr. Freeman, I see you standing at the mic, eager.
Oh, yes. I would just like to thank Ted Parent for proving that this system is a joke and
You're out of order. Please cut the mic
idea.
off. Mr. Parent.
I would like to, first of all, thank the board for all their hard work, the administrators for their hard work. I'd like to thank also the people that have been working at the checkout lines and our moderators and helpers to you, and also to you for your service to the district. And with that, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.